Can
Can
I say hi? Are we live?
Not
We
yet.
are live.
Oh, that-
You can say hi. We haven't started yet. Hi, everyone. Hey.
Hello.
Oh, this shirt. Hi. Started. Okay, we are recording, we are live, and we are ready.
All right, I'd like to call this meeting to order at 6:18 PM. We'll first do roll call. Brown,
Present.
Fabiana,
Present.
Gutierrez, Polari,
Present.
Lapua.
Yes.
Rudolph, present. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As a reminder, I was going to take a few moments to read through our mission, vision, and value statement. Our mission is to engage, educate, and empower. Our vision, the Bayshore community, growing engaged hearts, educated minds, and empowered visionaries. Our values and principles. The Bayshore School is committed to equity, excellence, creativity, and integrity in carrying out its work of providing educational and social services to the students and families throughout the Bayshore community. The Bayshore School works to maintain a responsive organization that meets the needs of its students, its families, its educators, and its community. Bayshore School values the unique contributions and perspectives brought by students and families, school and district employees, the Board of Education, and the broader Bayshore community. And with that, we will go into item 1, and I need a motion and a second to approve the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Item 3, public comments. Dr. Pittman, are there any public comment?
We have one public comment from teacher Lisa Santos. She is going to be speaking about our, thank you, our February food drive. So let me cue it up. Yeah, cue it up, and where should I stand? Why don't you stand?
Do you want
They're gonna see the, yeah, you can,
the camera's right over there.
but they're gonna end up seeing,
They're just gonna see
they're just gonna see the video.
Okay.
So. Okay, you tell me when you're ready.
Good evening, school board. Again, my name is Ms. Santos. I'm speaking on behalf of the Youth Participatory Action Research Elective, Coach Kevin, and also in partnership with Pacific Islands Together, Ms. Papua and Pitt. I wanted to present this video to show you the beautiful turnout that was of the food drive, and also as a thank you to everyone's support. And yeah, so without further ado, here is the video.
You want to make it full screen, right? The green side. All right, yeah, you can run. Apologies, folks.
Yay, that's all. Thank you so much.
Great,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Enjoyed that.
And that was the only.
That was the only public comment.
Okay. All right, item 4, consent items. I need a motion in a second to approve consent items.
Do we have any pictures of the shade?
We don't, but I can get pictures sent. Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 5, business and fiscal services. I'll hand it over to Superintendent Pittman.
Thank you. So the first presentation that we have is an oral report regarding solar energy presentation. We have 2 representatives from Fiscal Energy Solutions. So we have Gabe Johnson and Taylor Bolin. Is that how you pronounce it? Okay, so I am going to unpin me. Possibly, we're going to see. Okay, so both of you are able to start your presentation, and then when you're ready for me to show the picture, just let me know.
Okay, can everyone hear me all right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, members of the board. My name is Gabe Johnson, and I'm here with Taylor Bolin. We're with Sizerco Energy Solutions, and we're a Bay Area company. We've been here in the Bay Area supporting school districts, cities and counties, primarily with energy efficiency, renewable energy projects for the greater part of a decade. We're founded from another company called Sizerco Inc., which has been here in the Bay Area for over 40 years. So our mission, so to speak, and what we kind of do on a day in and day out basis is we work with a lot of school districts to help them focus on energy conservation and renewable energy projects. And so we started having some conversations with Dr. Pittman. One of the first things we explored verbally was whether there was opportunities for energy efficiency. We came to realize that your schools are, or your school, I should say, is very new and quite energy efficient already. So really the focus at hand is solar PV and EV charging stations. And so I'm your account manager, and Taylor is our specialist, so to speak, on the renewable energy side. So he kind of takes the lead when we develop projects for our customers, solar PV, battery storage, EV charging, et cetera. So we had some conversations with Dr. Pittman, and then Taylor went out and analyzed the site. He looked around, checked out the electrical gear, looked around for locations that potentially could be ideal for solar PV and EV storage. And we'll bring up a visual here in a minute to show you what we've come up with. I'd like to kind of give an overview of the process here, and really where we're at right now is we've done what we call a preliminary analysis. And so during that preliminary analysis, like I said, we're identifying opportunities where solar can benefit the district, and we're also doing energy calculations to understand the utility use so that we can size those systems appropriately. The goal is to try to offset as much electricity that the district uses as possible, given within the geographic constraints of the district itself. And so that's really what we're focusing on. And we went through that process, and we presented to Dr. Pittman some of the options, which we'll show you here in a second. And really the next step would be for us to do a detailed engineering analysis, where we go from about 10,000 feet down closer to ground level in terms of the actual sizing of the system, the specific locations of the system, the cost and the savings that they'll generate. And so we've submitted a letter of intent, basically a proposal to ask for the district's authorization to allow us to proceed with that detailed engineering analysis, so that when we're done with that, ideally we'll have developed a project that very closely aligns with what you folks would like to see in terms of the type of system, the location, the sizing of it, and the benefits it'll provide for the district. So I'm going to turn it over to Taylor, and he can bring up on the screen, or I'm sorry, Dr. Pittman, I guess you can bring it up. And Taylor will talk a little bit about what he found, what the opportunities look like. And then after that, we'll just open it up for questions from any of you all. So take it away, Taylor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Taylor, you can share your screen?
Oh yeah, terrific. I will go ahead and share my, it says participant screen sharing is disabled.
Let's see here, all panelists. Okay, try now.
There we go. All right, can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Wonderful. All right, good evening, members of the board. Yeah, so we are looking at a number of different areas of your site to put solar PV in order to offset your energy usage. And each of the various areas on the site has some pros and cons associated with it. The ideal section of your site, which is pretty much already put together for a solar array, is the standing seam roof on the eastern edge of your site, which covers the lunch area. The type of roof and the location over that lunch area qualifies it for what's called a DSA pre-check, which is basically there are off-the-shelf components which the DSA has already vetted and evaluated and found to be, up to the highest safety standard that is acceptable to the state for school safety. And that's this area right here. There's a good large chunk of real estate that's well-oriented for generating solar energy, and that will offset about roughly 25% of the site's energy usage. The second area that we investigated that we think is also a winner for the district is the parking area. There's a great open area in the parking lot, which will allow us to put multiple shade structures together. Those 3 shade structures put together would offset about 50% of the school's energy usage, and would also work nicely with the district's objectives to install EV charging at the site. It's well located. The switchgear on site is about here, so we're fairly close, and we would need to install wiring and conduits through that ground either way to install EV charging. So with that being said, there's a lot of kind of cost synergies that come into play installing PV in those areas as well. The third section of the site that we identified as appropriate for solar is this large flat roof here above the gymnasium. That provides a little bit of a challenge to the district because it isn't quite the right configuration to qualify for that DSA pre-check, which I was mentioning earlier. So we would be having to penetrate the roof surface in order to attach to the beams in the gymnasium to make that attachment. It's certainly doable, and that would provide roughly an extra 16-ish% offset of the district's energy usage, but it would likely be more expensive on a unit cost basis than the other sections of the site. So that's kind of a loose overview. I'm happy to dive into more detail if you guys would appreciate that, or if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer those as well.
So could you confirm, I believe you said the area over the lunch area would be about 25%, and
Correct.
then the area would be 50%. So between those two, we'd get 75%.
Yes.
Yes, that's correct. Those 2 areas, which are certainly the most ideal areas on the site, would provide about 75% energy offset. And just to kind of square away where we were using the 2019 energy usage of the site, which is a little bit higher than it is now, presumably due to the ongoing pandemic situation. We were anticipating that the site's energy usage as the pandemic winds down to ramp back up to where it was in the pre-COVID levels. But at the current time, that 75% would be closer to about 80 to 85%, given the current usage of the site in the pandemic conditions that exist.
I got a question on the main building. I know you mentioned about penetrating through the existing roof, and I believe they use a commercial product called IB Roofing in that particular area. What other options, as far as mechanically, with regards to fastening, to the roof other than penetrate? Is there another girder system that can be as an option?
Yeah, so typically what you'd see in for a rooftop like this would be something called a ballasted system, where you essentially have a pre-configured rack that holds the modules in place and then is weighted down by essentially cinder blocks. The DSA, which kind of oversees schools in the state of California, pretty much it does not allow those types of systems installed on rooftops. If we were to proceed with that route, we would have to do specific wind tunnel testing on the exact configuration of the array, and that becomes prohibitively expensive very quickly. Even more so than penetrating the roof to connect directly into those structural members and then re-waterproofing each of the penetrations.
Correct. Thank you.
Does the other roof area where the sun is shining, is that a viable location?
Yeah, so I did check that area out when I was on site. Unfortunately, due to the general code requirements for setbacks from the roof edge, setbacks from the skylights there as well, and the large area in the center here, which is taken up by HVAC equipment, there's very little ability for us to put modules in that area. And it would just not be cost effective because there'd be so few modules and they'd have a long distance that they would need to traverse with wiring to connect back into your site's infrastructure.
So in addition to the paneling, what else would be required?
Yeah, so essentially I guess the racking equipment, which would mount it to the rooftop for the seam area here, you'd be talking about clamps that grab onto the seams, and then the modules would be installed on top of those. In the parking lot, it would involve constructing steel structures, canopy structures that are tall enough for cars to sit underneath. I'm sure you've driven by solar carports before, so it would be a slightly tilted, roughly 10 feet high array that would sit and provide shade for those parking spaces. And then up on the roof here, it would be penetrating screws or something similar that would connect directly to the structural members of the gymnasium. As far as additional equipment, we'd be talking about running conduits that carry the electrical wiring from the location of the arrays to the inverters. And we'd do it in the engineering phase, which Gabe was mentioning, detailed. We'd figure out the optimal location for those inverters for each portion of the array. And that's going to take the direct current that's generated by the panels and turn it into alternating current, which is what the electric grid functions on, so that it can coordinate with the grid. And then from there, a disconnect, which will allow the utility or firefighters, whoever, to shut down the system in case of an emergency, and then just wiring into the existing electrical infrastructure.
How big are these inverters? And you'd need one for each, and how many would be needed?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that we'd really investigate. I think as a kind of a rough feel for you, inverters are generally about 2 feet wide and about 3 feet tall. Give or take, those tend to be a little bit on the larger side. Generally, what we'd see for a solution like this is for the carport structures, you'd likely want to mount the inverters directly to the carport columns. And for these rooftop systems, oftentimes we see them installed on the interior of the parapet walls so that they're still up on the roof, they're out of the way, they're not an eyesore, but are convenient to wire into the panels. With that being said, we also kind of looked at your electrical room, and there does appear to be some space in there. So if we wanted to aggregate the inverters in that location, we could as well. But really, that's a little bit more on the detailed side. So we'd be coordinating with the district to kind of determine what would meet your goals best in terms of aesthetics and the engineering considerations that would go into the system to kind of find the best solution that provides the district the highest value.
No, sure, and I completely understand that. I was just also, I believe earlier in the conversation, the word batteries was brought up. Is that, would that be part of this?
So we certainly could look into batteries as a portion of the site. I think as of now, our discussions and our analysis has been mostly focused on the PV portion of the sites. But with that being said, we'd be more than happy to investigate a battery system for your site. The rate structure that you're on does allow for batteries to provide some value, but they tend to not be incredibly cost effective on your rate schedule if you're using them as a revenue generating item. Now, that calculus can certainly change if we start talking about the less tangible benefits of the battery system being able to provide backup services for the district to keep the school online in case of a power outage. Once you start to kind of consider that, there's some thought that has to go into it from the district's perspective as to what a service like that is worth in terms of the cost that would be associated with installing the battery system.
And is that something that could be done as a separate project later on down the road?
Yes, it certainly could be. And I think that that's one of the things we'd like to engage with the district on. If that's something that's being strongly considered by the district, it's certainly something we'd want to at least know that you were planning in the future for, so that we could make our decisions with respect to the infrastructure on site and configure the system in such a way so that it's as easy as possible down the road to make adjustments to add the battery system in place.
Okay, no, that I was just asking those questions just to make sure we understand what dependencies or prerequisites are tied, what's tied together as far as the a phase one project would look like.
Absolutely.
Just to understand our scoping.
Absolutely.
Sorry.
But yeah, so just to give a simple rundown of your question, absolutely, batteries can be in play, and we'd be more than happy to make sure that we're taking all the engineering considerations into account for future expansion.
Did we take into consideration any solar panels along the fence line on Sharon?
I'm sorry, which fence line are you referencing? In the southern edge of the site here, the eastern edge?
Northeast edge.
Northeast edge. So there's a few troubles with that, I guess, or issues that could arise. One, we are considerably further away from the electrical infrastructure, so the cost of routing wiring and conduits back to the switchgear, becomes fairly expensive, especially when you're quite far away. Also, when I was on site, I was discussing with one of the members of the staff that they wanted to kind of keep these areas clear, but I'm certainly happy to investigate what we could do on the fence line. The other issue that comes to mind immediately is that the fence itself could shade the array, so it would likely need to be a raised array similar to these carports here. And given the location and distance away from the site, it would be less cost effective than some of the other options, but certainly if we wanted to push for that 100% offset, that would probably be one of the areas that we'd give more consideration to.
So then, you guys, I have a question regarding moving. You guys have other questions?
One last thing, what other districts in San Mateo County have you worked on in the most recent times?
Yeah, well, we're currently working with Cabrillo Unified School District. We're installing, Taylor, what is it, 600-700 kilowatts, 3 different systems over there?
Correct.
Yeah, they're probably the closest to you guys. We're developing some projects over on the East Bay as well. Emory USD is one. It's a smaller district as well. But yeah, I think Cabrillo would be the one that we would point to if you folks were interested in chatting with those guys.
Which is who I got the recommendation from.
Right, perfect. Thank you.
Teresa, you have questions?
No, I just want to thank the guys for their time, but I think this is something that we need to discuss, have more open conversation before we make any decisions.
Oh, so the point of today's presentation is for them to show, this is very basic. We're not signing a contract that says we're moving forward. The letter of intent that was attached says what the next steps are. So what that says is that, and Gabe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but what that contract says is they will then, if you move forward and you sign off, they will actually do all the legwork to say, this is what we would recommend for you to do in order for you to offset cost. If it doesn't offset, and correct me if I'm wrong, Gabe, it needs to be a benefit for the district. It either needs to be, you know, a wash for having solar, and it shouldn't be any extra cost to the district. And they would present to us at least two options. One is either us buying it outright, and the other one could be getting a loan. There are multiple options, but they've got to
Right.
present to us at least two. If they don't present to us two, and or what they present to us ends up costing the district more, then we wouldn't owe them any money. Is that correct? I think you muted yourself.
Gabe, you're on mute.
Please unmute.
I'm sorry, I clicked it and it didn't go off. Yeah, that is true. Our intention here in the proposal, the LOI that we've submitted, is to allow us to move into the next step of project development. And so that will take, the project development phase will take, I'm estimating probably about 4 to 6 months to put together the specific locations, the sizing, the costs. We need to bring subcontractors out, things like that. And so during that process, we'll have periodic project development meetings with the district where we'll present the information that we're putting together, and we'll present options, and we'll give the district the opportunity to provide input in terms of what systems you want, where you want them, et cetera. And then along the way, we will also bring in options for financing. If the district wants to finance the project, there's also a program called Power Purchase Agreement, which is third-party ownership. And then, of course, if there's capital outlay available and the district would like to use capital, that's an option as well. So as we work through the project development phase, we'll explore those different options, present them to the district, and ultimately, you as the district get to tell us what you want and which direction you want to go. And then we'll finalize all that, like I said at the beginning, in a way where we have a project that's developed with costs and savings that meet the criteria that's outlined in the LOI that we've submitted. And if that project is acceptable and aligns with what the staff wants, then we would bring back that project in a formal report tied to a construction contract. And that would go back in front of the board for consideration to move into the implementation phase where we actually build the systems.
Do you have any visual mock-ups?
I'm sorry, will we have visual mock-ups? Was that the question?
I was just curious if you had any on hand.
Are you talking about like of the solar systems themselves, like an elevation view from the side? That kind of thing? We don't have those put together yet, but certainly something we can provide as we move forward. Just for now, the overhead view and the conceptual system design is what we've put together.
And then did we consider any of the implications during construction and how that would affect, because especially if we move forward with the parking lot and how that would affect our drop off and pickup?
I'm sorry, ask the question one more time.
So during the construction phase, as they're utilizing the space, have we come up with some contingency plans on how we're going to
No,
work
because I
around
don't know
that?
I don't know what the timeline is or anything like that. Anything, I don't know if it would take 2 weeks, if it would take 3 months, if it would take 3 months or 2 months. It might be something we do in the summer.
Mhm.
Yes, we would have to come up with contingency plans. We would also want to plan it in a time frame that has the least amount of impact on. But all of that happens with them mapping out the process. We are not at the point where we would have those contingent plans in place.
Thank you.
There is one more component, if I may, that has to do with the timing. Some of you may be aware that there's some pending changes in the marketplace from the California Public Utility Commission, where they're basically, we anticipate a new ruling which will change the metering structure from what's currently called NEM 2.0, Net Energy Metering 2.0, to Net Energy Metering 3.0. And the summary of what that means is that it will have a negative financial impact for solar systems, because you'll no longer be able to true up on overgeneration over a 12-month period. It will change to a month-to-month period, basically. So when you're overgenerating in the summertime, you won't get credit for the winter months when you're undergenerating. So from a financial benefit standpoint, that's negative. However, there's an opportunity before that ruling takes effect. Taylor has a little bit more detail, but what we would do is we would submit what's called an interconnection application for the district, and that will allow the district to get locked into that NEM 2.0 legacy rate structure, so that you're not a victim of the change when it comes out, which we expect to happen at some point later this year.
Yeah, to jump on that a little bit, we expect the ruling roughly in June. The CPUC hasn't announced exactly when it's going to announce that decision. You guys may have heard some backlash to their proposed decision, which came out in December. And the backlash was actually so significant that they pushed the decision indefinitely. But industry sources are leading us to believe that it's likely to change in June. And as Gabe said, yes, it's going to significantly reduce the value of energy that is sent backwards through your meter out to the grid, which is particularly troublesome for school districts because your energy usage is generally considerably lower during the summer when you're generating the most energy. So there's a significant loss of financial value that would happen if you were to consider installing solar, let's say a year or two from now.
So if we move forward with the approval of this contract, what is our obligation?
Our obligation in moving forward is at the end of the 3 to 5 month process, they will present us a plan.
Mhm.
And if the plan is cost effective or net zero for the district, and we choose not to go forward, then it would cost us $23,000 is what the contract says. If we choose to go forward with it, then that $23,000 would be rolled into the overall cost of the entire. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so that is written here in the letter of intent, right? So if we're looking at the following, our proposed key milestone dates, we're already set for March, as far as authorization to proceed based on the signature of this letter. So I want some clarification regarding the proposed key milestone dates.
Uh-huh. So what clarification do you need?
So I just wanted to have an overview of all these dates that are listed here.
Okay, so Gabe, can you walk through those dates?
Yeah, sure. So the and again, they're proposed milestones because that was what we would anticipate in terms of a general timeline. And the purpose is to give staff some level of expectation of what's going to happen as we go through this process. So if the proposal that we've submitted is approved this month, so I'm looking down at the dates here on my desk. The very first thing we would do is we would schedule a project development kickoff meeting where our team would meet with district staff. We would go over site access, communication, safety, preferences in terms of meetings being scheduled, kind of all that stuff to level set with everyone. The next step would be as soon as the proposal is signed, Taylor, the first thing that he and his team will do is they'll start working to get those interconnection applications submitted so that we can get that out of the way and get your district locked into NEM 2.0. So that's really kind of the very first, most important thing. And then once we move past the kickoff meeting into the actual project development, a lot of the stuff will be behind the scenes at the beginning. It'll be a lot of coordination with our partners, our subs, getting material, scheduling, and then we'll coordinate with district staff when we do need to bring people on site to look at different electrical systems, rooftops, et cetera. Once we make our way about 30% way through that development process, we'll schedule a time to come together and kind of show you what we're thinking, give you some visuals of how this project's coming together. And then we do that again at 60%, we do it again at 90%. And by the time we get to 90%, we've met enough times and shared information that we should be very well aligned in terms of the project that we're developing in terms of cost, savings, size. And so we've basically assigned some months that line up with those milestones, because typically for a project this size, that's about how long it will take. There's no commitment on either side to hit those dates. We're interested in going as quickly as we can. I'm sure the district is as well. But those are really just guidelines that we want to present so the district has a general understanding of what to expect from a timing standpoint.
Great, thank you, Gabe.
Sure.
Okay. Any other questions or concerns?
I have a lot of concern that I need to get more clarifications before I make up my mind. I think I need to read more into it. I also need to find out how much we're spending on PG&E within our school. It's a very small district versus to what we're going to spend on this, solar. I mean, what is,
Well, hold on, real quick, take it one by one. So my understanding is we wouldn't be spending anything on this.
Our goal is, so Gabe, go ahead.
You will have options. When we're complete with the development of the project, one option that you will have is to use a power purchase agreement. Under a power purchase agreement, we would source a third-party provider that would actually own and maintain the system, although it sits on your land. So they would pay 100% of the construction cost. They would pay 100% of the operation and maintenance cost. There would be zero capital out of pocket from the district. In that scenario, the electricity would be negotiated under contract to be sold back to the district at a rate that would be lower than your current cost for electricity. And it would be fixed with an annual escalation that would be lower than the anticipated increased prices of PG&E. As I'm sure everyone knows, PG&E rates are pretty out of control right now. So basically you get locked into a lower rate with a lower escalation each year for no money out of pocket. That's a PPA arrangement. Alternatively, you could finance the project through something like a tax-exempt lease purchase, where the annual energy savings would offset the annual debt, so that the system would provide a cash neutral or a cash positive situation year after year. So in essence, you would be net saving money throughout the course, but you would need to take on debt if you chose that option. And then the third option would be to purchase the system with capital. So that's cash coming from the district. In that scenario, you would be responsible for maintaining it. You would be responsible for paying for the construction, et cetera. The benefit of that is 100% of those energy savings would go to the district. So what you're currently paying for electricity, would be anywhere from 50, 75, 90, depending on what we landed with your systems, would be eliminated from your electric bill. So there's different financing paths that we can explore. And as we move through the project development, we'll share those details with the district so that the district can decide which one makes the most sense from a fiscal standpoint. But it's our job to present the information, and then we look to you to tell us what you'd like to do. And I think Taylor can give you an update of how much you're spending on electricity, right? Taylor, do you have that annually?
I don't have that right in front of me, but I could track it down pretty quickly.
Taylor, while you're looking that up, is there also that one last option of if the district purchased it outright? Is there a best guess as far as what the maintenance schedule would be on a system that would be comparable to what we would probably, obviously I know it's scalable, but just to kind of give us an idea of what the district's costs of maintenance would be and what the life cycle of this system is. Does it normally last 10 years, 20 years? What's the use?
So as far as maintenance goes, typical maintenance for a solar only system is pretty simple. It's basically involves washing the panels a few times a year. Sometimes you see it as little as once a year, and sometimes as many as 4 or 5. But it would be the kind of thing where maintenance staff on site could just go out, give them a quick rinse, and that's to eliminate bird droppings, dust, things of that nature that accumulate on the panels, which reduce their output. But outside of that, there shouldn't be much maintenance required. The inverters, the items I was telling you about that change the DC energy into AC energy, those have a lifespan of about 15 years, 12 to 15. And that's kind of the short hole in the tent. The system itself, the modules, the wiring, all that should easily last 25 years, and typically they last 30 years.
And then Annette says that our PG&E bill is about $7,500. Which you guys see on our monthly.
Right.
Yes.
we ask
So-
other
Sorry, go ahead.
districts and see who they used? Do they use these guys too?
Yeah, so Cabrillo has used them, and then I put out.
No, I'm not talking about Caprio, because I'm far from Caprio, but like Jefferson, I saw Cedar.
Yes, I sent an email to everybody asking who they used, and I got 2 responses, and so I worked with them. So an option is for us to move forward, another option is for you to say you want me to get somebody else to give us a quote or plan as well. These are, or you could say, we don't want solar at all, we don't want to move forward. Up to the 5 of you.
What would the total cost of construction be?
That's part of their.
It's part of the
Oh,
discovery.
well, they would have to give us the different levels of raises that we were, yeah.
They don't need an answer.
Generally speaking. To get a ballpark range on what we
Ballpark
would.
figure, Taylor, what's the ballpark figure of what this will cost? Not.
Unfortunately, it's almost impossible to say right now unless you guys wanted to, break it down by which parts of the system you were interested in installing. I think we need to work pretty closely with the district to kind of figure out what meets your goals and what, what really you're looking for out of the system. It's a little bit hard to ballpark it. The other thing that would concern me a little bit is, as I'm sure you guys have been, experiencing in your own lives, the costs of materials, labor, everything is increasing. So it's difficult for me to project what the market conditions might look like when we're ready to sign a contract.
Right. And I think that the 5 of you need to decide in terms of thinking about the future of, when we built this building, we were thinking about the next 50, 60, 70 years. We weren't thinking about just 1 year out.
Mhm.
And so part of this conversation and thinking about this is if we transition to solar, there's two reasons for transitioning to solar. One is financial savings, because you're not relying just on PG&E. You're also building energy from a source that we
Renewable,
get.
right.
And so then that's the flip side to it is so the savings is part of it, but the other part of it is being environmentally sound in terms of making a shift towards utilizing energy that is sourced by our world. I mean, I know there's one more a better way to
Renewable
frame
energy,
it.
right.
But those are kind of the 2 main reasons why people go to solar. So that's part of what you guys need to think about as we think about, and then to his point, it's March 8th, and I believe PG&E just raised their rates again on March 1st, and they're just going to continue to go up and up. They're certainly not going to give us any savings.
Yeah, to see what's going on locally, I like to entertain the idea that we can speak with other sistering districts to see, what was the savings that they have or what information they can help us with in moving forward with solar.
The pros and cons of having solar.
Yeah,
So we're one of the only ones who don't.
right. So I know Jefferson Elementary, I think the majority of their schools have solar.
Right.
So am I hearing that we do not want to make a motion to proceed at this time?
Yes.
Do you want to take a vote?
Well, so what needs to happen is if somebody wants to move forward,
Yeah.
somebody needs to make a motion.
And then,
Somebody else would need a second, and then you take a vote.
Yeah.
You can't say, I don't want a motion, and that closes it.
right,
Sure.
If somebody wants to make a motion to vote, then that person needs to make a motion to vote. And if nobody seconds it, then we move forward.
Okay, I'll make a motion.
Okay, so nobody seconded it. So then what means is, Gabe, I will call you tomorrow to let you know what our next steps.
well, and also,
I appreciate all the time and energy you guys put into coming out and doing this, and we may circle back in a month. But for now, we're not going to sign it.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. We're here to support the district, so just let us know what you need.
Thank you both.
Thank you, Gabe.
Thank you.
But before we move on, I do want to make sure that we have a clear list of what we're trying to, what additional information we want. Because I believe if we individually ask just the generic question, do we want solar here? Most of us will say yes. So it's just a matter of what are our concerns, and that way we can get them to Dr. Pittman. And if it's a matter of getting, you know, like you were saying, Rick, even talking to another neighboring district and asking them what their pros and cons have been,
Right.
just so that we're prepared in that way, then I just want to make sure that we have that. So I don't know if we want to take the time to talk about it now, or we individually can send our concerns to Dr. Pittman. And then I guess we would consider adding this to the
Yeah,
agenda
yeah,
next
yeah.
month.
Right.
Yeah. Does that sound okay to everyone? I mean, obviously, feel free to chime in and let
Yeah,
me
that's
know.
correct. I mean, I appreciate the work in bringing Gabe and the team on to present this information. And I believe that we all would like to see solar. I believe we want more time to kind of gather more information and from other neighboring districts to see how they're doing with the solar program.
And actually, yeah, I don't know if this is is there like a generic or a sample ROI? Like how many years, if someone went down the capital expense route, what the like number of years for paying it off is usually on average, understanding that it's a generic sample and everything's different.
Absolutely. I would say typically, given that you guys are, you know, a public entity and can't take advantage of some of the tax benefits that come along with installing the system that can help bring this down, you'd be looking at roughly a 10-year payback period on a 30-year asset.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
That's helpful. Any other questions, concerns? Okay, we will move on then.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Good.
Night.
Okay. Item 5 is the second interim budget report. And it's back to,
Okay, so I'm gonna pull up the presentation. Okay, so we have the second interim budget report. So. move this on one. So the 2021 COLA was built in at 5.07. The orange statements are what have changed from the first interim, which we gave in December, to the interim, which we're giving now. So since then, the governor released his January budget proposal, which is for July through June of next year. And in that, he increased the COLA from 2.48 to 5.33. So we're going to see an increase in revenue for next year related to the COLA. Okay. And I want to be specific that that's related to the COLA because there's a decrease related to the number of student studies. And then 23-24, the proposed COLA went from 3.11 to 3.6. Okay. Then, so we are planning for a decrease in our funding for 22 and for 22-23 and 23-24 as the hold harmless funding ended. So for this year, we were funded held harmless based on our 1920 because of COVID. And so that was funding us at an ADA of 380.1. Our projected funding for 22-23 is 331.44, and then we left it the same or similar for the 23-24 of 331.85. So one thing that so that's what, because we're being conservative. We want to make sure that we are not overestimating and making assumptions on what we think or what we hope is going to happen. Those numbers do not include me submitting a J13A waiver for the low attendance that we've had this year because of COVID, requesting families to stay. So our ADA will increase once I submit that, but she's not counting that in here because it's not guaranteed, because we don't have it. Okay?
Until it's approved.
Until it's approved, exactly. The other piece that she's not counting in, we talked about when we did the January budget release, was that the governor proposed that instead of doing the current ADA funding, that we take either the current year, the prior year, or the average of the 3 prior years, whatever is the highest. And so if that is approved in the budget bill in June, then that would also be higher because we'd be averaging in that 380. So including that 380 in with 331 gets us the 350, which is higher as well. But we did not include that in there because, again, until it's approved, we want to make sure that we're conservative. Okay. On the horizon for 22-23 is we continue to have our ESSER funds, which came from the federal government, specifically related to COVID. We do have new funds, which are our educator effectiveness grant funding, and then our expanded learning opportunities program. So that new expanded learning opportunity money is what's going to pay for our summer programming, which will then free up some of that other ESSER money, which we had originally allocated to pay for summer. So we had said, remember when we got the COVID money, and I said, this is fantastic, this is going to pay for our summer program. And then they put in this ongoing expanded learning opportunity. So that frees up that money for us to use for other resources, because there's a deadline on that one time, whereas the expanded learning is ongoing fund. So that's supposed to continue year after. And then obviously we're taking into consideration increased retirement system rates. So currently STRS, which is retirement that we pay for our teachers, is 16.92. Next year it's going to go up to 19.1%. For PERS, which is all of our classified staff, it is this year is 22.91, and it's going to go up to 26.1. There is some conversation that maybe it won't go up as high as 26.1, but it definitely will still be higher than 22.91. But she's included in here at 26 because that's what we know.
Is there, what's the max? Do we know?
There is
no max. Okay.
PERS reevaluates, I believe, every 7 years.
Okay.
Based on the return that they've gotten. And keep in mind that for STRS, up until 5 years ago, I think is when they started making these changes, we were only funding at 8%.
Right.
So it's grown dramatically over the course of the years. And the reason is that they were saying that we weren't putting in enough money to pay for the people that were actually going to retire to actually fund them.
No, that makes sense.
And so what has helped sometimes is when our economy does really well. Over the past, the governor has done one-time funding to offset the need for us to get to that certain point for our retirement for STRS and PERS, and he's given districts $1 billion so that can offset the costs. That is not, he is not proposing that in this particular way. So major adjustments from first to second interim. As I already talked about, the funding for our summer program is switching, so that frees up some of our ESSER funds. We received one-time rate funding. We have not received the $168,000. We were awarded that grant. We have to spend it and then they reimburse. So we purchased our Chromebooks, we purchased some iPads, and we're going to continue to purchase till we reach the 168. And then there were additional state preschool funds that were given to all schools. We received an additional $58,000 for preschool, specifically related to COVID, but that's going to offset our anticipated encroachment of $15,000. So what that means is that our preschool gets funding because we're a state funded preschool, but it's costing us $15,000 more a year to actually run our preschool program. So this additional money is going to offset that, so we will not have to encroach on our general. Expenses, we shared that we paid off our van, so we have no more loans. It's just successfully paid off in December. The E-rate funding that was shows that we paid for Dell, the iPads, and then it also covers our hotspot expenditure for the year. And then we had to increase our health and welfare budgeted costs because they raised our rates effective January 1st. So what's a little frustrating about that, and we need to be mindful of as we move forward in any of our budget years, is that the health and welfare, so like, for example, Kaiser, the rates are from January 1st to December 31st. So there's always a change in January. So we budget for a certain amount from July to December, and then we have to make sure that we take into consideration there's going to be an increase from January to June of the year. And some years it's gone down, and some years it's gone up by 9%. So it really is on a yearly basis, and it all depends upon the situations of people actually going to them. The higher the cost, the higher the increase, the lower people go to the doctor, the lower the increase. And then staffing, we had a net FTE adjustment for our classified staff was slightly increased because of our instructional aides due to adjusting hours and support that we need for our students. We had the contract with a custodial service for a couple of weeks because a part-time person left, and then our full-time person needed to take some time. He has since been back. And then just as a piece of information, our parent community liaison, our food service staff, and my executive assistant have been working with the state on the required in-depth administrative review of all aspects of the district's meal program. So that's being taken into consideration. So this is a comparison of first interim to second interim, so you can actually see the changes. The big points that I want to point out is all the way at the bottom, which is our reserve percentages. And so for this year, we're showing still about 10%. We're showing a 13.31% reserve. It's a pretty much wash for next year, 11.15 to 11.09. And then we're showing a slight increase of what we thought was going to be 5.44 to 7.8. Now, I don't want to say we want to ignore that third year, but usually the third year out is never accurate for any district because there's so many things that change within a 3 years. But we also need to keep in mind that we are deficit spending for next year and the year after. And so that's why we need to be aware of, that's why our reserve is strong.
And again, I know you've mentioned this before. What is considered the best practice as far as a reserve percentage for a district?
17%.
17%. Okay, just want to make sure.
Yeah, some districts are above that, depending upon what kind of district they are, and some intentionally bring it down because they have, they're thinking about construction or they're thinking about computers that they need to change out, those types of things, and then they know that it'll build back.
Right.
So this is the variance between first and second interim. So new for 22 and 23, new revenue is due to the COLA increase that I talked about. Federal is decreasing because we're supposed to spend our ESSER 2 funds by the end of the year. And then adding the ESSER 3 funds for 22 and 23. For state, we added in our expanded learning opportunities program funds. And that will fund our 22 summer program. Local, the majority of that is our E-rate funds that we got for our technology, $168,000. And then we're anticipating an increase in community redevelopment funds over the next 2 years. And then contributions, larger portion of salary paid in 21-22 with restricted funds being moved to unrestricted funds. For expenditures, some were grant funded. We had some FTE increases. Again, it reflects the E-rate funded purchases, any expenditures that we now have that we've allocated, because in the first interim, she hadn't included that in there. And so now they show up in the actual expenditures. And then interfund transfers decreased due to the elimination of that preschool encroachment. So because we got that extra one-time money, we don't need to transfer money from the general fund to the preschool. So the beginning balance adjustment was because of the auditor's adjustment. And then the ending fund balance adjustment shows the net result reflected 23-24 is projected to be $150,000 greater than anticipated in first interim. But again, we want to remember that even though the ending that went from that 5% to that 7% of our reserve, we're still deficit spending. So we still need to be mindful, and we still need to think about our programming for the next year. We also need to keep in mind that a lot of the things that we're putting in place, like for example, our LLI instructors, thinking about that as we move forward, we're using these one-time funds, and we know that because that's what these one-time funds are meant to do, to support direct services for our kids. And so it's okay for us to be doing that, but we just need to be mindful of that as we continue to move forward, that eventually that money's going to go. So the timeline, you approved the first interim in December. We did the audit report in January. We actually did it in February this year. Next year, it'll go back to January because, you know, COVID stuff, right?
Right.
So, sorry. And then in March, we're presenting the second interim for your approval. It has to be approved by March 18th. And then we will present the unaudited actuals to the board for your approval in September. This is just for the 21-22 budget. I'm not talking about. So I just need, are there any questions? I mean, you've been asking questions. So if no questions, then I just need a motion and a second to approve this.
Motion.
Yeah.
All in favor? Aye. And I believe now we're on item 5D, oral report for the lunch program.
So for the lunch program, which addresses goal 1, which is about school connectedness, and goal 4, which is about maintenance. All that I want to share is I'm very excited. Last week, I met with our food service department because I have been in conversations with Brisbane Elementary, and as I previously stated, they are interested in contracting with us to provide their lunches starting for the next school year. So I met with the team to discuss a practice run. So the last week of March, we are going to put together a meal program on one day for one school to kind of do a practice for them to taste the food, for us to see how this goes. The superintendent of Brisbane and myself are going down to La Honda Pescadero to see their model because they have one central kitchen that they then take and deliver the food to the other schools. So we want to model after them. Ours will be our central kitchen. Brisbane would provide they buy a similar bus, it would be a van that's has the warmers in it. They would take care of all of those costs. It would not come from us. And then Ms. Sabato and I are going to go over to the school this week or next to see what their serving looks like so that we can make sure that we're set up. We're going to do practice. We're going to see how it goes so that we can learn. And if we're able to make this happen, then 2 things are going to happen. One is all of our staff would be able to be full-time, so 8 hours for all of them. I've asked them, they're all on board. One needs to just decide if she wants to be full-time, if she has another job that she wants to discuss, which would mean they would all get full benefits for themselves. And then we would actually have an opportunity to hire another part-time person that would help us with the Brisbane. So it's really exciting. I'm really proud of our kitchen staff and our kitchen team, our food services team, because this is only happening because the food is so good. And it is. You know, I rave to all of my colleagues when they come and have a meeting with me. They ask me what's for lunch that day so that they can eat on campus. And so I'm really proud of the work that we have done here. And so, yeah, so I'm excited. It's what I wanted to share.
Great.
Thank you. Great.
I look forward to when they start actually marketing the
Right.
chili sauce. Start selling.
That's supposed to be a secret.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
Next is our school wellness policy committee. So in our administrative review, with the state for our school program, one thing is we're supposed to have a school wellness policy committee. So we have a board policy that says we're supposed to have school wellness, but we don't have an actual policy in place. So I just wanted to update the board, because the policy should consist of food, nutrition, should consist of physical education. There should be components on there that talks about whether or not we do fundraisers with food, whether or not we have vending machines. So I'm going to be pulling together a committee of staff and parents and students to sit on this wellness policy committee, so that we can update and create one for us. And we'll take models from other schools, districts as well. We're not going to reinvent the wheel. But I just wanted to update the board. That's one of our next steps in our school wellness program.
Great.
Item 6, educational services. Yeah. Resolution 2112.
So this, I'm going to go ahead and read the resolution. It's apropos that today is International Women's Day. Because Resolution 2112 is recognizing March as Women's History Month. So whereas American women of every race, class, and ethnic background have made historic contributions to the growth and strength of our nation in countless recorded and unrecorded ways. American women have played and continue to play critical economic, cultural, and social roles in every sphere of the life of the nation by constituting a significant portion of the labor force working inside and outside of the home. American women have played a unique role throughout the history of the nation by providing the majority of the volunteer labor force of the nation. American women were particularly important in the establishment of early charitable, philanthropic, and cultural institutions in our nation. American women of every race, class, and ethnic background served as early leaders in the forefront of every major progressive social change movement. American women have served our country courageously in the military. American women have been leaders not only in securing their own rights of suffrage and equal opportunity, but also in the abolitionist movement, the emancipation movement, the industrial labor movement, the civil rights movement, and other movements, especially the peace movement, which create a more fair and just society for all. And whereas despite these contributions, the role of American women in history has been consistently overlooked and undervalued in the literature, teaching, and study of American history. Now therefore be it resolved by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America and Congress assembled that March is designated as Women's History Month. Now therefore be it resolved that the Bayshore Elementary School District celebrates the accomplishments of women in history, encourages our schools to celebrate March as Women's History Month, and encourages teachers to teach lessons about women in history in their classrooms.
Okay, with that second, I need a motion and a second to adopt resolution 2112, recognizing March as Women's History Month.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 6B is an oral report on standards-based grading. I'll pass it back to Dr. Pitt.
Okay, so I'm going to show a video regarding standards-based grading. It's about 6 minutes. So, here we go. Well, let's see. Now stop. Okay. What do I need to do? Okay. Yes. Oops.
May seem unfair, how grades can be justified using the same grading system nearly all of us experienced in school ourselves. During the course of study, each student was graded on one assignment each month, and those were averaged into a final grade for the course. Each of Henry's assignments were based on the skill of actually walking. Henry, who did not demonstrate a walking ability for quite some time, earned a 0 on the first 3 walking assignments. Maybe he couldn't walk, or maybe he just refused to. However, on the 4th, 5th, and final assignment, Henry earned 100%, as he not only walked, but ran across the room and jumped over some toys in the way. His teacher, Mr. Tuffman, using the same system that's been used for many years, averaged all the assignment grades together, and the math showed that Henry earned an F at 50%. Henry's parents are concerned about his grade because their son can walk, run, and jump, but has been marked as a failure. Liv was lucky to have Miss Masters, a more experienced teacher who knew that toddlers progress in skill related to standing, balancing, and so forth before being able to fully walk. In her class, assignments were not all based on walking, but on the skills leading up to walking, with the final assignments addressing specifically the skill of walking. Like in Mr. Tuffman's class, there was an assignment each month, but instead the difficulty of the assignments increased over time. Liv earned 100% for standing, 100% for balance, and so forth, but earned a 50% on the last 3 assignments. The average of all those grades turned out to be a C. But what does a C mean? Finally, Adam still scoots on his belly, but earned an A with Mrs. Morepoints. Mrs. Morepoints grades the same as Miss Masters, except for one difference. Mrs. Morepoints provides extra credit in the form of extra movement. She believes this is a good idea because even if the toddler is unable to walk, moving around shows that they're trying. Additionally, students don't lose self-esteem by having a low grade. Adam earned low grades on every assignment since the first, but was able to complete extra credit assignments, and with the extra credit added, his grade results in an A. Adam's parents are thrilled that their child earned an A and leave the school happy, unaware their child is developmentally far behind. Within a traditional grading system, the mathematical calculation of each of these grades is generally accepted, which is precisely why a traditional grading system can be severely flawed, and why educational systems around the world are making the shift to standards-based grading. Within a standards-based grading system, students are not graded on their accumulation of points or an average of points from each assignment. Many assignments and activities are meant as practice to help students learn the skill or knowledge they're meant to acquire. In the School of Walk, the toddlers were meant to acquire the skill of walking as defined by a standard. A standard is an agreed-upon level of skill or knowledge that a student is meant to demonstrate by the end of a learning period. Courses of study likely have multiple standards for student performance. A single standard for the School of Walk might read something like, student will be able to walk 10 feet without hesitation or falling. It's a measurable benchmark that can be assessed by any teacher or evaluator. The measure of success on the part of the student would not be rated on an ambiguous A to F scale, but instead as a descriptive scale such as exceeds, proficient, approaching proficiency, and beginning. Additionally, the teachers at the school would evaluate the standard and the proficiency scale to determine specifically what it means for a student to meet each level in relation to the standard. For example, a student who exceeds the standard of walking would walk or run farther than the 10-foot distance. A student who's proficient can walk 10 feet without falling. One who is approaching proficiency can walk fewer than 10 steps without holding on to something for support, while a child who's beginning can't take steps without support. For more information, visit nampa.school/sbg or talk with your child's teacher. Together, we can improve teaching, learning, and communication through better grading.
Is that something that we can put on our website?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Oops, hold on, sorry.
And then for the parents, are they aware that it's
Yeah, so at the beginning of the year, we send out a letter that reminds families that we do standards-based grading. When they get their report cards, so give me a second and I will share, the rest of the morning.
Did we host a special meeting for the parents on standard base?
In the past, we have,
Suppose that today
we don't do it, we haven't done it every year, other than teachers have talked about it in back to school month. When we have our back to school night, and they teach it in various different ways. And there is not a standard way that we have asked them to do it. So that's something that we might want to discuss in the future. And so just to remind that for what does standard-based grading mean, which is communicated on our report cards. We send a letter home at the beginning of the year that talks about this. And we've been doing the same letter for years when we rolled this out. And we shifted to standards-based grading, Mrs. Baker, we've been standard-based grading kindergarten through 4th grade for 20 plus years. It's always been that. And then we shifted for 5th through 8th grade, probably in 2014, 2015, is when we made that shift. And so we want to remind everybody, and this is one of those things, and part of this is as you as a parent, you are used to your own experience. And most of our parents, if not all of our parents, experienced traditional letter grades when they were in school. And so you have in your mind that A is the best, and F is the worst, and C is average. And so I'm not going to talk about that. But what I am going to talk about is the purpose that the reason we shifted to standards-based grading is because we want to make sure that our students and our parents know exactly where kids are in relationship to the specific standard. And so we don't want to think about A, B, C, D, or F. We want to think about our goal is for our kids to be at the standard, at the grade level standard or above. So our goal is for kids to be at 3s. If you are a 4, it's because you are above grade level. So what that means is if in 2nd grade, well, if in 1st grade, you're supposed to be able to add and subtract within 10. And in 2nd grade, you're supposed to be able to add and subtract within 20. You don't get a 4 in 1st grade unless you can add and subtract between 10 and 20. If you can only add and subtract to 10, and you do it every day for 180 days, you're still only a 3. You don't get to go to a 4 until you can add or subtract above the 10, which is a requirement, and up to 20, which is 4. And so for many of these things, that's why there's an NE, which is not evaluated, is because maybe a teacher isn't teaching that particular standard in the 1st trimester. Maybe they're not going to get to it till the 3rd trimester. So if there's no grade or there's an NE, it's because they just haven't got to. If it is something that they've never seen before, there's a really good chance that kids are going to be 1s and 2s in the 1st trimester. There might be some kids that are already 3s because maybe they are ahead. Maybe they were a 4 the year before and now they're a 3 because now they're at the grade level that they're in. So we want to promote that conversation with our families that this is a journey. The goal of the standards is for them to be meeting grade level standard by June. Not by September, by June. So our report card reflects specific standards by grade. So that was my example of math. The next step is proficiency scales, which he talked about, is knowing within counting up to 10, what does it look like to be a 3? What does it look like to be a 2, a 1, and above 2? And then communicating that out. And we still have a lot of work to do. In terms of, and so we're going to talk about that a little bit later when we talk about our VTA exec conversations subcommittee. But we're working with our Mrs. Baker and myself are working with the union executive team from the teachers union to dive deeper into how to make us better at standards-based grading. So looking at the iceberg in terms of what's below within our systems that we either didn't do or haven't done, so that we can create a better system, which will then have an impact on it. But our focus right now is to get really good at using systems thinking, specifically around standards-based grading, so that we can then model that for a different situation that we want to address. So we're not perfect, but we're perfectly trying. So we're trying, and we're having these conversations to deepen our own understanding as we continue to move forward. But one of the reasons why I brought this up here is because we've had conversations, and we want to make sure that you as a board understand what do our grades look like, so that if a parent says, I don't understand what this is, you have an understanding. And so that was a video that another district made, which we can post, but I would like to talk to our AIM teacher to talk about having our own students put together a video of what standards-based grading is. Because part of that learning is which is the goal we want to get to, is our students taking ownership of their own life. Our students should be able to communicate with you at the very least by the 8th grade, why they have a 3 and why they have a 2, and how they're going to get from a 2 to a 3. And how you as a family can help support them, whether it just means that they're a 2 because they're supposed to be reading every night and they don't read at all. Or they're a 2 because I need some extra help with my math. Can we get a tutor? Can I go to after school tutoring with Miss Miriam? I just need some extra help because I don't quite understand the algebra concepts of math. And so our goal is to get our kids to be able to explain where they are and the extra help they need, or how they can get from a 2 to a 3 or a 3.
Do we feel that all our staff are on board with this system?
What does that mean?
Is everybody agreeable to this grading system? And how do we know as a board, as myself, that staff are giving as many resources to help them with the grading system? I don't want to say that I heard, because no, I don't do that. But just a curiosity and question is, are all our staff on board with this grading system? And is everybody doing the best they can to collaborate with parents, to introduce it properly to the parents, and even on a report card? Not just to say the number, but be descriptive about it, because that's what I learned from the video. So that's just a question I put out there.
So I think 2 things. One is the board makes the decision on how grades are determined. Whether you use letter grades, whether you use standards-based. The teachers decide how a student is graded within the class, within that system. I think that we have staff that have not received training in standards-based grading in the expectation that we have, and I think that's an area of improvement that we have. And so that's part of the reason why we're doing the iceberg, is to figure out so that we can provide the support to our teachers who need that extra help, and to come up with some minimum expectations on clear communications from a school and district level, as well as what our expectations are in an individual class. So we did very in-depth training around standards-based grading the year before COVID. And then COVID hit, and then we had lots of things came into play that possibly could have derailed the conversation. Some assumptions were made, and so yes, we have some improvements to make in terms of supporting our teachers to make sure that there is clear communication and they have a deep understanding. So, for example, with Proficiency Scale, some teachers are farther along with it. Ideally, we want to be at a place where all teachers have a deep understanding of what proficiency scales are, and they're utilizing that with every single assignment. And part of this conversation is also going to go into our other subcommittee meeting, which is our data and technology, data analytics and technology.
Yeah. Well, as far as proficiency scale, I guess at a minimum, you definitely want each grade level So if there's multiple
Yes, they
teachers at a
work
grade
together.
level, would have, be working off the same proficiency scale.
Yes,
And then that would be documented, so when those students move to the next level, those teachers can say, let's say it's third grade, to move to fourth grade, the fourth grade teacher can then say, oh, what scale did they use during this?
sure.
Okay,
Right, and so when we did the in-depth training, it was twofold. One is it was by grade level, so the grade level team determined the report card. And then it was by grade plan to make sure that there was a scope and sequence between, so for example, fourth grade did theirs, and then third and second and fifth and sixth came and looked at it to make sure that there weren't any gaps. And so it went both forward and that's not to say that we shouldn't do it again. And we shouldn't continually remind people and put it out there, just like we need to continually remind people about our mission and our vision and our goals, and provide whatever support they possibly need. And that support could be time off for them, not time off, but a sub for them to get some more, to collaborate with their partner teacher, or to, we offered for everybody to do grading with equity. So that was a component in terms of thinking about how does that fit in with standards. So we just need to do a better job. I mean, here in Canada, we need to do a better job with supporting our teachers in their understanding and making sure this is accurate.
and you had mentioned the grade levels looking so that there's a transition.
Mm-hmm.
For eighth grade, are we looking at ninth grade and what is used for ninth grade?
What do you mean what is used? They look at the standards within ninth. So for English language arts, they're grade levels, and then when we go to high school, it's a grade standard. So Ms. Santos, who teaches eighth grade English, would be looking at, okay, this is what they're supposed to do in eighth grade, and then here's 9 and 10. So it's a spin.
So
And
again,
so some have, and some we have not given. So when we did that first process, yes, that was included. And Santos wasn't here, so she was not part of that training. And what's really unfortunate about our district, we have lots of pros to being a small school district, but there are some cons, and one of those cons is we have such a limited number of staff. So Ms. Santos doesn't have anybody to collaborate with as a fellow eighth grade and seventh grade English language arts teacher, because she's the only one there. And so we have to think outside of the box of ways that we can support her and provide her with thinking partners that are teaching the same things that she's doing. And that's not just her, there are other teachers that follow that too. Now, she herself goes out and finds her colleagues and has her own support network, but we as a school in the district should be able to have some structured support in that way as well, so she doesn't necessarily focus.
And the high schools use letter grading.
The high schools do less.
okay, that was my point. And this is where even if that's the case, I'm just curious, what can we do? So one of the examples that someone gave at the Masters of Governance class that several of us were able to attend said they had a high school district that had these expectations for graduation,
Mhm.
but they didn't meet the requirements to get into college.
Correct.
And so then they went back, reevaluated whether, and they came up with a special track. So if you're going to go to a technical school, then you don't necessarily need that. But if your goal is to go to college, then you need to know this. And I'm just thinking, I want to work backwards to make sure if there's, for instance, if you have to take 4 years of math
Mhm.
to get into, a UC or whatever, that we at least tell the kids what they need to be at if they really want to get on that
Oh,
track.
we do that. We do
Okay,
that.
and that's great.
And then specifically for math, we, along with Brisbane, Pacifica, and Jefferson Elementary, for 11 years now, have agreed that we don't do advanced mathematics in middle school. We follow up through 8th grade because they can do advanced when they get to high school, and we want to make sure that kids aren't skipping grades. And that they are taking each grade level and mastering that. And then when they go, and then depending upon how they do on the SBAC and teacher recommendations, they can go, because Jefferson Union doesn't do algebra, geometry, and they do integrated math. They can skip integrated 1 and go straight into integrated 2 if they can prove on the SBAC that they have a deep understanding of the skills that are taught. So we have had students that have been able to do it. So then they are ready to push forward.
Can I say something?
Sure.
Brian, Mr. Patel and I, when kids apply to private schools or anything like that, there's a way that we just transfer the grades to accommodate their system. They're not learning different things. They're just being evaluated on it in a way that's really putting the focus on learning. And it just reminds me of, because other places are doing things in an old school way, doesn't mean that that's the right way. And we're at the forefront of making change. And I'm really proud of the fact that we're really being thoughtful about what's best for children and not just sticking within a system because that's the system that I grew up with or that we grew up with. So.
And then the other piece is I did call Jefferson Union before we went down this path 10 years ago, 9 years ago, to make sure our students would be penalized, and they are not for our students.
You know, what's so interesting is because the preschool, their desired results, this is how they do parenting conference.
Yes.
And this is how they evaluate and observe children. And it started from, a very basic thing like the top is conditional. So if your child is succeed or proficient in that skill, it's not in letter grades or even in numbers. It's just, and on the bottom, there's like 43 measures that describe, a certain skill. And then under each domain, it has all these examples how teachers will be able to observe that child. And it's interesting hearing this. It's very similar system.
Right,
So
because-
my goal is, Dr. And I'm gonna ask politely if we can reach out or even I'm gonna put you. My expectation as a board member is to reach out and extend those resources to our other staff who needs help in this system, that they haven't gotten all the full resources, to give them those resources, because we need together. That's what we do, is together we work together. So I don't want to hear from behind that, oh, well, I haven't done any, haven't had any training or anything. But at least we offer. And then you have my expectation for you, and then you have your expectation from your staff that they're able to do that. Thank you.
So next was, I just wanted to give you an update on our equity audit. They sent me a draft, I reviewed it, I made some notes, we had a conversation, and so in April, I will be presenting the final draft and our recommendations. I just wanted to circle back to give you this update.
Thank you.
Real quick on that. Ms. Brown, were you part of that? Were you able to be part of that?
No, because it was before.
It was before her. Okay, so that I just wanted to make sure. So I don't know, do you want to give her a quick
Oh,
overview?
so we contracted with the company to do an equity audit for us. So they looked at our data, they looked at our policies, they did focus group meetings, they did a survey with parents, students, staff, and then they did focus groups or interviews with small groups, board members, as well as teaching and classified staff about where we are in terms of equity for our students. And then the goal is for them to give us a roadmap to make sure that we are doing what we said we want to do, and to help us along the way to determine if there are gaps, how we can address those gaps. So in April, I will give the final report of the group.
You have a summary report,
Not yet, I will in April.
so I guess I'd like to see it.
No, I'm gonna present, you guys will all get a copy. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, item 7, human resources. And is there any questions about the calendar? If
No.
not, I need a motion in a second.
Question, with the first day of,
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Rick.
no, the first day of that that calendar year of school.
August 15th,
I didn't see that.
next week,
Yeah, look at the tech. I didn't see the
this one.
August 18th
August.
would be the first days kids are on campus.
first day, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
Okay.
the 18th and 19th.
From June.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Item 8 is school reports.
Head over to Principal Baker. Start with Read Across America.
Okay, so first I'd just like to thank Ms. Santos for making this very sweet slide that captures some things that happened during Read Across America Week. So we did several things. Ms. Santos, and in her role as ELA lead, along with Mrs. Law, coordinated readings, as you see in these pictures, of middle schoolers reading to the little ones. And it was just delightful. We couldn't have the guest readers and the whole lunch and all the things that we used to do because of COVID. So this was really just a lovely way to celebrate reading. We also had a contest, which we have always had in the past for the little ones for K through 3. It was how many books could you read? And for 4 through 8, it was how many pages could you read? So with the younger grades, the 2 kindergarten classes tied and they won. And then in the upper grades, it was Miss Mary Catherine's 5th grade class won. And so they all had an ice cream party on Monday. And so, yeah, that was our simple Read Across America for this strange year during COVID of not having guests on campus and things like that. But it went really, really well. That's it. You have any questions for me about that?
The readers right there.
So is it a video? No.
Yeah, I'm just gonna. I'm classy.
Oh.
Okay, so we're running.
Anyways, thank you. That was a very
Great,
great
thank you.
idea of utilizing our older students, you know.
It was
It's
so
so sweet. And I know sometimes reading out loud in front of others can be.
right. And so it also hit on the.
But it's practicing their public speech.
Yeah, this exactly speaking and listening, and in some of the classes, as well, they're getting that set up. The teachers kind of, like in Ms. Heinrich's class, for example, she just helped facilitate. Oh, here, we'll just watch this.
Okay, so hold on, I'm gonna share it on the meeting. So hold on.
Your box was checked.
Mhm.
Okay.
I think
I
it
saw it.
was.
I saw it.
Share, yes.
Yes,
I'll
it
share.
Okay.
And then the middle schoolers want to go back, and the elementary teachers want them. So there's
A celebration in a bun. If you've never experienced a splendor of a hot dog, you should really wait a second. This hot dog is mine. I found it. Of course, enjoy. Go ahead. Would you say that it tastes like chicken?
Oh no.
Can you believe this guy? What?
I have to say, although I feel like I've been replaced, I do appreciate the middle schoolers doing. That's awesome.
Mhm.
And then there were some of the videos on our social media as well, where that class did a roller coaster thing. It's pretty awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks again, Ms. Santos. Thanks so much. Thanks all the skill sets. Okay, so the pantry, and I know you all had a lot of questions about this, so I just want to give you some updates on this. And I'm hoping I addressed your questions. If you have some further questions, I'm hoping I can answer them. So there were questions about the logistics of the pantry. So again, it's a closet. So we're calling it a pantry because it's about the size of like a pantry. This is no room. It's just a little closet. It's under the stairs in the north end of the school. And the inventory in there is just a simple shelf. It's a locked closet. And the inventory would contain all new products, so non-perishable, so all canned goods, packaged, pasta, rice, beans, things like that. And then also another section of clothing. The items that would be in the closet are taken from the survey that we did with our families to see what people needed. This is in no way replaces our food bank on Wednesdays. This is just a very simple kind of grab and go. And the examples that I could use are a student whose grandmother is at home, who is not well enough to come and get food from our food bank on Wednesdays, but perhaps has a granddaughter who is in middle school and can go in the food closet and say, I'm gonna grab some mac and cheese and a couple of things for breakfast tomorrow, or to get us, for the weekend, something like that. The requests that we had were we did survey the community, the school community. This is also for the schools, it's not for the larger Bayshore community. Mac and cheese, tortillas, pasta, cereal, canned fruits and vegetables. And then in the clothing end, socks, beanies, and jackets, things to keep people warm and so those are the kinds of things that would be in this little pantry. The maintenance of this would be maintained by our wellness team, which is Miss June, Nancy, myself, Mr. Allen, Millie, Mary Catherine, and then that's Faith in Action, which is an organization that we've been working with now for several years to help with things that might be harder for us to navigate that we don't know, that aren't on our radar yet with us, and then also some student volunteers. So through the wellness team is paid. This was during COVID, during distance learning, this was the home visit team. So it's now kind of morphed into this wellness team, which is this small group of adults who are compensated hourly by a grant that we got from Faith in Action. So they are paid for their time. For the students we have 4 students who have expressed interest in volunteering to support. This would help fulfill some of their community service hours that are in development, graduation in 8th grade. And the accessibility of the pantry is just by appointment. It's calendared by Ms. Bowman. I've already spoken with her. She's completely on board with doing this. We would have a morning before school, which the appointments would be met by before school by Miss June. The closet is right by the preschool. She has said this is the perfect time for her. She would be able to go and either meet with a parent who would of course have to show vaccination status and just walk them over. They can grab a bag and grab maybe 10 things and put them in a shopping bag or whatever it is that they need. And then also on Friday afternoon, which would be Mr. Allen, and then I can fill any gaps if there's things that people can't be accommodated within those times. And we have a clipboard. We would have a clipboard where we're documenting exactly what people are taking so we can start to monitor the kinds of things that people need. And I think I kind of covered all of the things. So if you have any further questions, I'm happy to field any questions you have.
To what capacity is Faith in Action involved in?
In the pantry, not very involved. I mean, there's sort of more, Faith in Action has really been kind of like a fairy godmother for us when we had the home visit team, when we had families that were coming with immigration status issues or housing, eviction, things like that. They have access to legal support, things like that. I'm not really certain how they would help with this, but I really have appreciated their guidance when we needed help because they've navigated things like this in the organization.
And they're the ones who give us the grant.
And they're the ones who give us the grant. So what we had before, when we were all learning, we had the home visit team, which we realized at some point, we really weren't a home visit team. It really is a wellness team because yes, home visits and other things. And then we had the wellness coordinators, which as you might remember, every person on the whole staff had a small group that they were communicating with so that we were catching those families that might have been falling through the cracks during COVID. So this is kind of the diamond that has come from that work to maintain that connection with our families who need further assistance. I can also use an example of a student I was talking to, a middle schooler, and they asked me, would I be able to access them? I said, yeah, I know that this is a student who has a single parent who works, that often works at night. It's very difficult for this child and his sibling to really have to take care of themselves a lot of the time. It might be a situation if someone had some kind of injury and they were unable to, I mean, there's so many different scenarios. I'm not expecting a stampede of people to break down the door trying to get things out of the wellness pantry. I think it's more just like a case by case thing, just kind of slowly wading in and see how it goes, reevaluating, seeing what we need to change. We saw things like this in action when we went to Maine, and it was just a lovely way to serve the community and provide just simple things that folks were in need of.
And so when we went to Maine, one of the components that they also had was that this pantry was for kids who needed snacks throughout the day. We are very fortunate that we don't need to utilize that for that because our lunch program is doing so well that we are going to be able to fund snacks for all of our kids, healthy snacks, whether it's fruit, cheese, those types of things. And so we are very fortunate that we are in to some extent a better place than Maine because we can provide free breakfast, lunch, and now snacks to all of our students. But there are also situations where they might need something a little bit extra at home. And it might also be for clothing. We see kids who come to school that we notice that they have holes in their shoes and might even need pair of shoes. So it would come from here. Or it's raining outside and they don't have any sort of sweatshirt or jacket on. And that's something that we see all the time. And so to Ms. Baker's point is it's not a huge number, but it's enough of a number that if we can provide this service, because remember, President Rudolph read at the beginning our values and principles. One of our values and principles is that the Bayshore School is committed to equity, excellence, creativity, and integrity in carrying out its work for providing educational and social services to students and families throughout the Bayshore community. Because we are a very special place that there are some gaps, and we have been trying for years to be a community school. And this is one more example of another step in the right direction for us to do.
And the other thing just to note is that this is not goodwill. This isn't something where people can just bring things and say, oh, I want to donate this. This is meeting the need of people who are expressing the need. And that's one of the important things about noting what people are taking. We already have a little bit of a step up if we were moving forward with this because there's food left over from the Tonga, the food collection, and a lot of that stuff are things that people said they needed. It's exactly what they said they needed. We also have a donation of hoodies and sweatshirts that came actually from one of Ms. Santos's friends. And so one pair of brand new shoes that I bought for that Mrs. Taylor and I bought for a student who then turned out not to need those said shoes, which still have the little tag on them and everything. So I think, you know, it's really, it's not meant to turn into a big operation. The kids who would be involved, like what their role would be to maintain, like if we have like a little donations box that was kept in the office, and that they would then help to keep it stocked and you know, make flyers and posters, things like that. That would be the extent to which they would be involved right now. And again, this is a Google Doc. This is a work in progress. This is not a PDF file. This is something that will change as needs change.
And then I know that Ms. Brown sat on the last meeting where they discussed this. Do you have anything you want to add?
No, I'm just thinking that if it's like a community room or community pantry, is there space anywhere or even in the pantry for information or bulletin board? For
No,
more
that's-
than what you're
Resource.
offering, that's great. I understand that's great. But there are sometimes health and wellness issues that might, be offered to the community and the school.
So I think, that's a really great suggestion. It might be something, you were on Zoom for the meeting. So it's just, it's literally a closet. It's like where Harry Potter's room was, it's under the stairs. And it might be something where maybe that turns into a little community board. I don't think we're expecting it's going to be a place that's really visited. I think what I see with what you're saying is to maybe have something like that in the lobby or the office. That would be really accessible to people. And then as we start to notice what the needs are, then there might be other things that, that there might be other needs that are addressed by this little pantry operation.
And I think two pieces. One is just that, again, this is by appointment, it's not meant for her. Two is it's just for the school community. It's not for, oh, my neighbor has some needs, I want to go get something from my neighbor. But then the other piece is, to your point about health and welfare support, is that this would be a good opportunity for us to loop in our parent community liaison, because she can start adding connections, and we have some of that stuff posted in the front office. But we probably can find a better way to post it and communicate it, so that we can provide those resources that families maybe don't feel comfortable asking for. But if they see a posted, or they see it on our website, or they see a sign on the poster board, that they will be able to gain information. Because oftentimes that's what happens, is there's a need and they just don't feel comfortable asking for help. But we want to make sure that they still get.
And the other part of it, and this is something that came from that whole wellness, the work that we did during COVID, where everybody was working with all of our families, where everybody had families assigned to them, is I think the lines between school and home got a little blurry, and in a good way, that people kind of were able to, because of the nature of education at that time, we were kind of more in people's homes, so to speak, in terms of like really having to help them manage the way things were going. The members of our wellness team, each person on this is sort of the go-to person for a different grade span. And so when I send the weekly update every week, that's in there, and you get to do a better job of really talking about what that could look like. But when a teacher is seeing and this already happens somewhat, is someone's noticing this kid's coming to school and they're falling asleep all the time, or they're coming to school and it looks like they haven't bathed in a few days. Can someone reach out to that family? That's kind of the work that we've been doing. And maybe it's referring someone to counseling. Maybe it's learning more about their whole housing situation and getting Faith in Action involved. If there's any number of, maybe it's that they're hungry and that they need their parent is working at night and they're coming to school. They're going home and they're on their own and they just need something simple that they can cook. We need a little help.
How much is the grant?
I actually don't, I think it was,
$10,000.
I think it was like 13,000 for the year. And so we still have funds from last year, and we can renew it. It's something.
And that goes to pay the staff.
So they're paid hourly. When we have our meetings, we have a meeting every other week for an hour. And then if they're doing home visits, they're tracking their time.
Okay, and my concern is I don't want them to be taken away from their.
It's outside of their.
None of this is during work.
It's all outside of their.
Do we have a contract for that?
Yes.
For them, for those particular staff? And the other
Oh,
thing, we need to look at it as liability. If anything happened to these staff during the time of the.
It would be a workman's comp, the same, and when they do home visits, they do home visits.
No, I'm talking about the food pantry. So if, say, for example, my family will come in, I need food.
Right.
And then, but that will be during the time that the district is paid for that staff to do their work.
No.
Who will be taken away from those staff to go do the food pantry?
You won't vote.
The staff, so Miss June is after school between 3:15 and 5 on Fridays. So I'm sorry, I just got it backwards. That's Mr. Allen. Miss June is before school. between 7:45 and 8:15. No one is doing any of this work during their contracted hours.
Okay, so
I am doing the work. If someone needed to meet during the day, then I would. be that.
okay.
I'm not getting.
So that's where the appointment only
Yes, only.
time is gonna be
It's all
scheduled for.
outside of, nobody's being pulled from their current job to do
Got
it, except for maybe.
Other than food and clothing, are we also doing like hygiene kits?
That's the kind of, I think that would be great. I want to, I think it's about like, that's an excellent question.
Because we never, we asked for a washer and dryer, that never happened, but now we're gonna have a food pantry. We even asked for a closet, particularly for uniforms for children to, when children don't have
We have-
uniform,
we
but
have
we change into.
We have learner uniforms that we give children when they come in without a uniform.
Okay,
Now, the washer and dryer is not an issue that I didn't, it's because I didn't want to give it to you, it's because I don't have the space to give it to you because I need specific water.
oh, remember I showed to you the space over there?
Yeah, so I can connect it, but then we've got to think about how it's drained.
Drainage, yeah, sewage.
Because I don't
The
want,
gray
I
water.
don't want to.
So my other question is, if you're running out of items and food and stuff, and if people will stop donating, food and stuff like that, then what budget would you tap in to fill up your?
This is donate, so PTO is looped in with this as well. And this would be something facilitated by them, as you saw by the outpouring of support for Tonga. Like, I think this is a simple little closet. It's not an enormous, it's not a container full of food. And so that would be facilitated by the PTO and staff. And we've already had people step up. Nothing would be coming from this.
I have a couple questions. So it sounds like it's still a work in progress. But
Just let that.
but what is the plan, if any, as far as marketing this and communicating it to the?
So that was another, I think, really great thing. Great thing that came from COVID was just really having a more active social media account with Facebook and with our Instagram, as well as Real Share, pushing things out that way. Our PTO is more active than it's ever been in the time that I've worked here. I think that those are all the different ways that we would be publicizing. And again, this would be a real soft opening.
Right.
This would be,
Right, because we have families that don't need it, so this isn't something where we just want to open it up and.
Right.
Oh, then.
It's a lot.
Well, that's right. I was thinking about.
Free clothes, and I just,
But see, if we do something like this, either you do it all, you go big or go home. It's not, I don't want something that we start today and then by next month,
I think,
finish.
yeah, so I think as long as the framework is solid, I think the part that's the go big or go home part is like really having like an airtight framework for how this would work and making sure that we've thought of all the things. I think as far as what is housed in the the wellness pantry, that's the part that needs to change and shift with the needs of the community. So I agree with you that the last thing we need is something that's a little firework and then it goes out. But I do think that our wellness team is sustainable. The grants is sustainable. The people who are on the wellness team are very, very committed. The quote that Ms. Santos had, it's like not, what is it? Not how much you give, but it's the love that you do it with. I mean, these are people who are, I'm blown away by their commitment to this. And I just think it's, I don't see why it's not sustainable. It's a small closet. It's being used to house off-season PE equipment.
I can definitely see this closet growing. As you stated in parentheses, there's goal 1. So I'm curious to see eventually what goal 2 and 3 and 4 might be.
Oh, no, I
No,
Well, I'm just, yeah, right. But, if we're looking at this, who's managing? Because I see maintained by wellness team. But who's overseeing this whole thing? Is it going to be our principal?
Yeah.
Okay.
She oversees the wellness.
And isn't that enough on your plate, Ms. Baker?
I think it's not something, if we were having perishables in there, if we were having, you know, having it be something that people could access more easily, like, I think there would be a lot of reasons why this could become too big to handle. I think the way that we have it organized, it's not. Because it's just sitting there. It's like things that are sitting there that people can grab when they need it. It's nothing that has to be maintained other than stocking it. Like there's nothing to worry about. We've already, you know, it's going through making sure there's no expired cans in there. That's a great lesson for children. Knowing what, you know, if green beans are a vegetable or a fruit, because that was a question that one of them asked me. That's a great thing for us to have a conversation about. I'm happy to have those conversations.
A couple of quick follow-ups. So I guess this is more of a comment. If a child or the family of a child of this community is utilizing the closet because they need it, is someone going to ask them the question of, are you signed up for the Wednesday? Okay, I'm just making sure that we're.
Yes,
closing-
and for example, the two families that I can think of just off the top of my head, one of them, the adult who would come and get the food is elderly and cannot physically do that. The other family, it's because of work that the adult can't come on a Wednesday to do that.
So I think to
Yeah.
your point though, if we have somebody who is regularly utilizing this,
Yes.
yes, the wellness team will be checking.
What is our
that.
exit strategy?
Yeah, to find out what this family obviously has more
Yes.
in-depth needs, and so how can we support them? This isn't the answer, but it is somewhat of a Band-Aid in some certain situation. And the wellness team would work with that family to determine, are there other things that you need that we need to have a bigger connection?
Okay.
So for example, during COVID, the home visit team would pull boxes on Wednesday and hand deliver it to exactly the families that I'm thinking about right now. This isn't a family of 10, you know, it's not like a huge family where people have a lot of needs. Nobody's gonna go in with a shopping cart. Like, here's your little bag, get the things that you need for the weekend. And quite frankly, there might be some people, there might be a student who says, you know, this is what I need this every week. And that's a beautiful thing if we're able to provide that versus an entire, you know, box of groceries every week. Because I think that's kind of like, if I can go back to what we saw in Maine, you know, there were kids, you know, it's like below freezing and there would be kids who didn't have a coat, you know, and this isn't about, charity in the sense of like you get somebody else's old ripped coat, you get like, we're not putting, you know, we're putting good healthy food in there.
And actually, that's why I was asking earlier. I'm glad you brought that about the clothing thing back up, because that's one of the things I wrote down, like the communication is, I know you had said we're only collecting new clothes, but that's where it's like, even if we say that, my concern is that we're going to start seeing bags of clothes dropped out in front of the school, used clothes.
So we're not asking families to even come and donate. That's not how
Okay.
it is. So for example, Ms. Santos had a connection and she got a donation from friends and colleagues, I don't know all the details, regarding sweatshirts. PTO would facilitate possibly like, hey, we need some more of these things. These are the things that we need. And we're not advertising to our community, hey, we're doing a donation.
So that's exactly
drive.
why it's asking.
No,
Okay, that's
absolutely
why I wanted to know exactly what's going to be communicated. And the other thing is though, even though it's going to be small, there needs to be some sort of tracking mechanism, because if nothing else, you want to know what your run rates are going to be, so you can keep things stocked. The other thing is, even though it's non-perishables, most non-perishables have expiration.
Yeah,
dates.
and she has
And
a.
so, and on top of that, if heaven forbid, there's a recall on a particular product,
Right.
we can look and see, well, what product have we had? What's an inventory? Oh, what did we distribute? So I'm thinking tracking coming in and going out, so that we know. I mean,
Right,
obviously.
that's
the-
a lawsuit.
Well, and also, I mean, again, if someone says that they got sick off of the
Right.
food, what is our exposure on that?
The same exposure from different child, so they got sick from a.
Okay, I mean, again, it's just adding risk. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just making sure that we are vetting it fully.
Sure. And part of that is by making sure that, one, it's new. And two, we're paying attention to the dates and we're not wrong. And then the other piece is, unfortunately, we live in a religious society. We can't stop somebody from saying.
Oh, no, right.
But we can do everything within our power to make sure that we are providing a service for our families that need it. And keep the district.
Yeah, and I was just thinking, I mean, if we're gonna do a tracking, but then that's where like, you know, Miss June and Mr. Allen would need to know how, when someone's coming in, they can actually track, what are you taking?
I've already made a spreadsheet
Yeah.
that we would be checking boxes and, you know, writing down what people talk.
Because again, it's one of those things, you know, a lot of in manufacturing, whether you're building 10 or 2,000 or something, the process is the same. So we just need to make sure that we've got the process in place to support it fully. You know, to Mr. Boo's concern about, like, we don't want it to be this thing that's all exciting and then, you know, we want it to be successful, we're gonna do it. So that's why I'm just bringing those up.
I guess my concern is not taking away and not adding another task added to, especially you, Ms. Baker, when you have a whole school to take care of. And you're not just taking care of just one particular staff, it's all the staff, the families, the children. That's just my concern, and that you're actually, you know, not overwhelmed, you know, with everything. And it's a good deed. It's a really good. It's something, and let's not forget that even the PTO, most of the members of the PTO are staff on this, you know, over here already. So it's just like how to allocate people with their time, their free time, you know, that they're not overtasked and overburdened with, you know, the stuff that goes on in the school.
Well, that's why I think it's important that these adults are paid for their time. The kids are excited about this prospect of community service. So I think that, you know, no one is, I mean, anybody could stop at any point if they wanted. And I also think that most of the staff who work here would say that healthy kids coming to school feeling cared for and loved by this community causes them to be more just happier to be here and to be part of this community, which then makes this a better, richer and stronger community and makes our school more of what it already is. And that makes my job easier. So there, that's what it does. For all of us. I mean, I appreciate your concern about that. I think that, you know, the more that we're supporting our kids and supporting our families, and then they come to school and they want to be here and they feel part of things, then that it all comes back. It's all good.
Well, I understand it's a work in progress, but it would be ideal if it isn't already being started, but a process document that talks about all the different transactional components of managing this, of the process for making the appointments, the process for PTO fundraising, the process for getting the inventory in, and the process for
A workflow.
yeah.
So we have rolling, you know, we have a rolling agenda for our wellness team. And I think that would be part of what that would look like. It's really getting airtight about what the logistics are.
And I understand it's a work in progress, so it's.
Yeah, and I really appreciated the questions that you asked, because I think just having it in writing and really having it so that we're all on the same page is really, really important. And that's going to be what makes this successful.
And ensuring that we're in compliance, if anything, right?
Mhm.
So is there anything that we need to be in compliance with regards to storing even perishable items?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I know the kitchen is something different, but we're talking about the pantry. So I just wanna-
So then the last thing was just the community cleanup that we are organized with the PTO that just happened today. Unfortunately, I couldn't be a part of it, but everybody took pictures. Ms. Santos made a beautiful little text thread where people could share pictures that they were taking, the middle school team, the electives, they all went and helped, and the kids had a great time. The dance party video was my favorite. And you know, there's another one on Thursday, and free.
Awesome.
Beautiful. So thank you, Wi-Fi, thank you, PTO.
Where did they actually clean up?
So out, around the perimeter, which included all the way down to in front of Midway, off of Shoreline. Because if you drive around, you can see because of the wind and because there's trash that gets into the, in with the plants and everything like that. So all the perimeter, all the way up to Midway, Oriente, Attila, Oriente, and then those were the parents, and then and some kids, and then the kids were inside coming through. You're trying to show
The map with the areas actually.
Yeah, that's Jeff, who we used to do that.
Yeah, I was
Small,
wondering, were
you
they
know, we have
involved?
the ACEs.
Was the Boys and Girls Club
Yeah.
or Park and Rec involved?
And Jeff used to spearhead that.
Yeah, they didn't, this was really a white part, so they came from.
But no, I like it
Yeah.
because we stopped cleaning way back.
This is what you want to share? Or did you send?
Sure.
Yeah, so they had a map of exactly where everyone was going to be. Yeah. Really organized, coordinated with Mr. Sun. Parents came in through the garden gate and they had all the supplies. And it was nice to see some community pride.
Yeah.
Was the, not that people are gonna be paying attention or tracking it, but how many bags of trash were they able to collect? We know,
We use the clear, like thin ones, like the wastebasket ones, so it really depended on weight,
yeah, okay,
because we did find some heavy items like bottles.
but most of it, I assume, was like litter, wrappers.
yeah,
just food.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think of what sort of feedback loop can come out of this activity. First of all, recognition,
Yeah.
because everyone that participated should be recognized. Because it's not only opening the school, it's helping the whole community. But second, the thing is of like understanding the impact of when you walk out of the, McDonald's or whatever, and you throw your wrapper on the ground,
It ends up on our property.
it ends up.
Or if you're across the street from the school and you decide you want to get rid of the bed frame. why
Right.
not?
Well, again, it's just bringing, I mean, again,
Sorry.
bringing that awareness of it makes a difference.
Right.
And if you see something, say something. If
That's
you see
right.
someone drop it, something, say, hey, can you please pick that up and find a waste bin? And I'm just trying to think of ways to take it that step further.
Well,
Not that
the
it
other-
isn't enough, but
Mhm.
it's like,
The other thing that this made me think about is the importance of just really communicating with our politicians about they should be charging people, they should be fining people. If we're catching someone on video who's throwing trash in front of our school or a water heater, they should be getting fined just like someone else somewhere else is.
see,
There's no, this is definitely something that should not be limited to the school as far as this being an issue. So,
Well,
Good
Ms.
point.
Santos, I challenge your class, your white bar. Go into those meetings, go sit on the, that can be a public comment.
bring the garbage with you.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, did I say that out loud?
Take pictures and.
It's a sixth grade novel, folks, where they started a community garden. One of the characters, all the chapters are different characters. One character brought bags of garbage into the city council meeting and they finally listened to it.
Well, there you go, this is your time.
Wi-Fi is unfortunately ending this trimester, but we still want to, keep that group of, young activists and also hopefully inspire new ones for next year. But that is a great idea. I agree.
so I think it's like that, it's opening the door to a lot of activism in terms of what we talk about always about us needing to be the squeaky wheel to get anything. there's no way that you would see the kind of things that get dumped in front of our school be happening in certain other parts of the Bay Area. So I think that's being a squeaky wheel. So. Great.
Thank you.
Great job.
Thank you. And I apologize. I need to eat, so but I am very grateful and thankful, and thank you for listening to the Wellness Pantry presentation. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
So now it's our COVID update.
Item 9, superintendent reports. Yay.
Okay, so this is the current San Mateo County data. So for the entire county, there have been 10.2 cases per 100,000 in the population this past week, compared to 16.1 a week ago. In comparison, that's down from 239 cases per 100,000 on January 8th, which is a decline of 96% countywide. There are 80 new COVID-19 cases per day compared to 126 new cases per day in last week's data. And then the test positivity rates countywide are 2.4%. And then when you look at the health equity quartile census tract, it's 2.8. So that gap is closing, which is exciting because there was a gap before, but now it's getting tighter, which means we're being more consistent no matter what the health equity question is. So it's just decreased considerably in the 7-day, which goes through February. Our numbers, again, there's a link for the dashboard. And so this is on our website. So as you can see from the first week of school, we knew after January that we went up, then we went back down. So the week before our February break, we had 0 cases. And last week, the week before, or the week after our February break, we also had 0 cases. And again, that number includes staff and students, and it goes by. I just want to remind everybody that testing is occurring in our community for PCR community testing. We are now on a consistent time schedule of every Monday, Friday, and Saturday from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. We are also getting this week another round of at-home test kits for all of our students and staff to send home when we go on spring break the first week of April. So we'll send those home again for everybody to take the Friday and the Sunday before we come back from spring break. Last week's numbers were promising. We were home for a week and we came back and there was nobody on campus that had tested positive. So that's why no letters have been sent out and nobody has to quarantine, which is a plus. And then the county, these are all pediatric vaccination clinics, so 5 to 11-year-olds. So every Monday, and I will have these with the actual addresses posted on our website and push out to our families for people who want to continue to get vaccinated that haven't necessarily yet. But every Monday is in San Mateo, Tuesdays in East Palo Alto. There's nothing on Wednesdays. Thursdays are in South San Francisco. Fridays are in Redwood City. Saturdays are in Half Moon Bay, and Sundays are in Bay City. So there's a nice breadth across the entire county of vaccination options for all our children.
Can I add, there's a pop-up coming tomorrow.
Oh,
It's in the San Bruno Park School District. So I think it's all for all, not just kids. So it's at the Bel Air Center, and
if you can send you, I can use
Yeah.
that up for. So one of the things that the board has to consider tonight is the CDPH mask guidance, which is based on science and medical data, effective at end of day, meaning 11:59 p.m. on March 11th, which is this Friday. California transitions from its statewide universal indoor masking requirement in K-12 school settings to a strong recommendation that individuals, meaning students and staff, or anybody who comes onto a school campus, continues to wear masks indoors. So it's not saying that masks are going away. It's saying that we're not going, but it's not mandated. It's not policed, for lack of a better way of saying it, but that we still strongly recommend that you wear it, which means I will be wearing my mask at home. I will still be modeling. I would expect students and staff to continue to wear their masks because we're in a strongly recommended state. Also, California affirms the authority of local health departments and local educational agencies to maintain their established masking requirements for K-12 school settings in their respective jurisdictions. So each district can make their own decision based on the data that they have. Keep in mind, for example, our outside masking of our students and staff has never been required. It has always been strongly recommended, and 99% of our students and staff continue to wear their masks. So that's an example of what strongly recommend can do. The San Mateo County Health Chief stated today that his statewide requirements for masking in some indoor settings have shifted to strong recommendations. We continue to strongly recommend that residents wear the highest quality mask that fits well in indoor settings when around others, which is why we purchased for all students and staff either KN95 or N95 masks. And the indoor masking requirement for schools and childcare settings ends Friday at March 11, 2015. So again, the mask mandate now goes from mandatory, which is what it was, but as of March 12th to strongly recommend, which means it's a COVID-safe decision. It's tied to contact tracing and quarantine, and San Mateo County Health follows the guidance strongly recommend. There are 4 levels. So once we move from strongly recommend, it then goes down to recommend, and then it goes down to option. I don't know when those are going to happen, but I do know that the state of California and San Mateo County will follow the data, and they will make a shift eventually to where we will get to a point where it is optional. And keep in mind, as I said, strongly recommended is recommending that we should be wearing masks indoors. As it moves down, it then gets to the optional phase, which is where you as a personal, you're making a personal choice. And so for some, I've given examples of my mother who says she will continue to wear her mask at work, even if this makes the shift for her school district, because she hasn't been sick in 2 years. She says that I'm wearing the mask for me. And so that's part of the conversation as well. And we will support our students and staff to make sure that they're supported in that. So again, the rationale is we move to strongly recommend based on data, and then it moves itself. I want to remind the board that we are now almost exactly to this Friday will be exactly 2 years since we transitioned into having to deal with COVID and shutting down our schools. And over the course of those 2 years, I have recommended and the board has adopted policies and recommendations that follow San Mateo County Health and the CDPH. I have said from the beginning, I am not a medical doctor. I am following the guidance of our medical doctors. And so this is the recommendation that I am saying we should continue to follow CDPH and the San Mateo County Health. For other information, what are other districts in San Mateo County do? We're all in the same space right now in terms of presenting to our board and making this transition because it's happening this week. We have 23 school districts in San Mateo County. 20 are recommending or having a conversation with their boards to continue to follow CDPH and San Mateo County guidelines of strongly recommending. 3 are recommending keeping until after their respective spring breaks based on their specific data that exists within their school districts. We told the staff of our teachers, 17 teachers responded, of which 47.1 said continue to align with CDPH. 41% said they wanted to require us to continue to require masks, and 11.8% said they didn't have an opinion one way. We told our classified staff, and they were right down the middle. 47.4% follow CDPH guidelines. 47.4% said keep masks required, and 5.3% said they had no opinion one way. And I'm just sharing this information with you so you have an idea of where our staff falls. And just like in anything, you're going to have people that fall on both sides of the decision. And so we will do whatever we can to support whatever decision the board decides to make. These are some quotes that were given from staff members who decided to provide a quote. They were given the option of putting a comment, or they could come tonight and speak. And some opted for comments. So I'm tired of managing kids' mask issues. They don't wear them correctly anyway, and it's a big hassle. I'll continue to protect myself until I feel comfortable not wearing a mask. If it's possible to encourage everyone with symptoms to mask up rather than requiring everyone to wear one, that would be ideal. So after I read these, I'm going to go back and add some comments. So I'll add some comments about if we do make the shift to strongly recommend, what does that really mean in terms of our other policies that we already have in place. If undecided, younger grades should be able to be maskless if hindering with speech and phonological development. The teachers also need to be maskless in order to teach these skills. With vaccines readily available, we all have a responsibility to take care of ourselves. If for some reason a person has not been vaccinated or is high risk, then they have to take measures to keep themselves safer by wearing a mask or getting vaccinated. In the same token, if we choose not to wear a mask, we accept the risk of being around someone who has not been vaccinated and may be sick and contagious. I feel strongly students cannot learn basic phonological awareness without seeing a mouth moving. Wearing masks goes against the very principle of all education. Masks do more harm than good, and have taken away from teaching students valuable skills while everyone worries about covering their eyes. I think we will continue to have more spikes this year, and consistency with masks will make our life easier as a school. We should reevaluate masks for next year based on the data over the summer. Not a time for another dramatic shift. Students are 99% used to wearing masks and are not complaining about it. I think it also depends on where we are individually with our infected numbers. In my opinion, we should have the mask until we know that all the students are fully vaccinated and their parents too. I do not want to expose my loved ones that have some health problems to the negligence of a person not following recommendations. I strongly support mask requirements for all students and staff on campus. Children under 5 are not eligible to receive the vaccine. The on-site preschool program serves students 3 to 5. Consideration to all in-person students should determine additional policy for the remainder of the 21-22 school year. I think we should finish off the school year with masks indoors and outdoors for all staff and students. Let's continue to stay safe and end the school year on a positive note. While the science is there with being able to take off masks, we have another grade coming up in which students will likely be exposed to family members that may or may not develop COVID-related symptoms. I think that keeping masks until the end of the school year would be the best choice, and we can revisit the wearing of masks. It's optional for the next school. So if we shift to, I shouldn't say that. If we continue to follow CDPH and San Mateo County health guidelines and make the shift to strongly recommend, what that doesn't mean is that we're just all masked, right? What it also means is our other policies where it says if you have symptoms, you stay home. If you have symptoms and you come to school, we're going to test you and we're going to ask you to wear a mask. Because if you have symptoms and they're not COVID, we still don't want you to spread germs, and a mask will keep you from spreading germs. So those are policies that we'll continue to follow, even if we make the shift to strong. The other piece that came up was that this is a continuum. So if we make the shift to strongly recommend, that doesn't mean that we can't go back to mandate. If a spike does occur and we see that there is transmission within our school site, then we can shift back and say, now we need to go back to putting this in place. And that holds true for the state as well. Because remember, I said there's those 4 levels, right? And so just because you drop down doesn't mean you can't ever go back up. These steps are there because you can move one way or the other depending upon what the data says. So at this point, if you guys can ask questions, it's open to you. These are our options. We do nothing, and you say we'll continue to follow the CDPH and San Mateo guidelines, and then I will communicate with our staff and families that this is what's going to happen starting Monday. Or you can say, you know what, we want to require masks until another time, but it's open. You guys need to discuss it, and it's open to the.
First question.
Yes.
Has the state mentioned adding this to the required list of vaccinations?
It is one of the bills that has been opened, but it has to go through the bill process in terms of getting approved by legislation and then signed by.
Because I'm looking at the County of San Mateo government update today, February 9th.
Yes.
It says in alignment with the state county of
They're
San
not
Mateo.
very long.
Oh, I mean, not February 9th, sorry. Yes, so last,
Okay.
but it said, at that time, it said unvaccinated ages 2 and up should still, has they mentioned anything about unvaccinated?
There is not a discrepancy. So they're strongly recommending whether you're vaccinated or not, wear a mask in school. They're saying whether you're vaccinated or not, we should still wear a mask in school. We're just not going to require it, but we are going to say that we strongly recommend. So it's a bad example, only example that I have. you can come up with a better one, tell me, is that if I'm a passenger in a car and I choose not to wear my seatbelt, it's a choice that I am making. It's strongly recommended that I wear a seatbelt. Nobody's gonna give me a ticket because they can't see whether or not I have my seatbelt on or not. But it's better if I wear my seatbelt, right? Because if an accident happens, I need to have my seatbelt. And so it is, so we would be recommending that when I go in the classrooms, I would still expect to see masks. But what this does allow is, for example, for that phonological awareness, if you have the teacher standing at the front of a room and he or she is away from the kids, he or she could take off their mask so kids can see how their mouth moves, but they're not in close proximity with students. Whereas in a mandate, that's not possible.
But it also leaves it up to the child. So the parent could actually put a mask on the child in the morning, but when the child walks in the door, they can take their mask off.
They could, and I would say that the majority of our students are continuing to wear masks. As I said, outside is not required, it's strongly recommended. And 99% of our kids continue to wear masks.
Good.
And if it falls off, they run inside and they ask for a new mask, which we would still make available.
When do we anticipate most of our students to receive the booster shots? That's going to be in this summer, right?
Yes.
I kind of want to go with the preschools that have it required and see how the.
Yeah, would you mind bringing up the list of cases, how it spiked in January, the spreadsheet that you showed?
Ours?
Yes, ours, yeah.
Joey, that is Bayshore gonna do another vaccination clinic?
We do not have one scheduled. It doesn't mean that I can't work with them to host them.
And when is spring break again?
April.
April?
So this is spring break. We're here right now. So keep in mind, so this is when Omicron was high, okay? And that's why the case numbers went up, and then they immediately started to drop. The concern about, kids going home for a week at spring break, we just had a week off. And when we came back from the week off, we've had 0 cases, and we have 0 cases up through today. So we're a week and a half in after a week off, and we still have 0 cases. So that's what our current data is.
So what if we wait until after spring break and then we can,
Reassess.
yes, reassess and how it is, and then we slowly, but we, I am so tired of wearing masks, I swear. I'm
Try
really
working in the
tired.
hospital.
But at the same time, I'm looking at some of the concerns too, with pertaining to the special ed class. Is that really, if it's something that we need to have their mask for that teacher to able to teach, then maybe we can make some little exception
Or buy those masks that have the clear view.
or.
We have that.
Yeah.
I mean, is it the type of, we could basically say, let's keep the mandate through and reevaluate it at our April, when's our April board meeting? April 12th.
I'm good with that.
But then we need to prepare ourselves what our plan is when it comes to that board meeting.
Mhm.
Right,
Yeah.
well, and back to the blocks, it sounds like in April, they're planning on going from strongly recommended to recommended,
Possible.
possibly.
Yeah, so by then,
And also ideally, this spreadsheet will have 0, 0, 0, 0.
Even if it has 1,
Yeah.
2, or 3, it's still a low number that.
A lot of unknowns.
Well, I'm just saying, if ideally it would be 0, 0, 0, 0,
Yes,
and it even
ideally.
makes it that, I understand. The fact is, we have had these masks on for 2 years, and my daughter is one of those that you talk about that leaves their masks on all the time, which is a good thing. But I think maybe rather than ripping the Band-Aid off, so to speak, we say, let's reevaluate. And again, I'm suggesting this. I'm not, so please feel free to disagree. But we reevaluate at the April 12th board meeting. And to your point, what is the criteria we're looking for? For me, I think I'd be more comfortable, especially, Dr. Pittman, you were saying, even if it's one. But ideally, especially if it's 0, 0, 0, 0, then I think we're in a pretty good shape at that point. And it's hard to argue. And I think it also, at this point, we're talking about it in the board meeting, and we're preparing the staff and the families. I think giving them a little bit of a heads up will help people adjust to this. I mean, correct me, feel free to disagree.
No, I don't disagree, but I disagree with the 0 because we might have one.
I was just I'm just
Yeah.
saying best case scenario
Yeah.
is those are all zeros.
So even if we have one, then we're slowly moving down to strongly recommend.
Mhm.
How does that? Because we were looking at the time, it's 9 o'clock. We're not gonna be sitting here. I motion for that. We can continue to mandate. And then when we come back in April, then we can reassess it, and then we can move down to strongly recommend.
Do we get a second on our motion? Second, and then let's go ahead and we'll take a vote. All in favor of?
Aye.
Oh, sorry.
So keep mandate through April 12th.
Mandate through spring break, which is through mandates through after
To
spring
board
break, which is, and then reevaluate at 4/12.
Mhm.
Yes.
And it's by Teresa, seconded by Rick.
We're about to
Unanimous.
take a vote. All in favor?
Aye. And I apologize for the staff that say that they're tired of policing children with masks, but we're doing the best we can to protect everybody, vaccinated or not.
Okay, so next is an oral report regarding the Museum of Tolerance. So we took a team of staff down to the Museum of Tolerance. This is the second time we've done this in a formal setting. I have one person here who won't. But I asked for those that went to either come and speak, and if they couldn't, to give me a statement. So they have 3 statements that I'm going to read. If you've ever been to the Museum of Tolerance, it was started to present Holocaust, because people didn't really know and wanted to make sure that that story never went away. I shouldn't say that story, but that history never went away. And people know and talk about it so that we don't ever repeat it. So one element that we saw is the Holocaust exhibit. So you actually walk through and you see the history of how it happened, how he was elected, how it changed and shifted, the number of both Jewish people as well as non-Jews that were murdered during the Holocaust. We got to hear from a survivor. She was a child during the Holocaust and made it out and was able to tell her story. We then also did the social lab, which is a new exhibit for them. So we sat at a table and they bring up a quote unquote hot topic. So it was about homelessness and how do you solve homelessness? And then the people at the table, they give you suggestions. Would you do this or this? It tells you the pros and cons. And then it's meant to guide your conversation. And then there's an exhibit that walks you through the history of civil rights movement, a history wall that shows America from the when we first started in the 1700s, and then they go decades for you to see what tolerance looks like, what diversity looks like, the things that have happened in decades all the way through current day. We spent time as a staff going through how we can interrupt racism and receive some tools and did some practices on whether we hear somebody say something, how can we interact with that? So there's the strategies of interrupting, there's the strategies of questioning, there's the strategies of echoing, and then educate. So there were 4 concrete strategies that we were able to actually practice and learn with, that hopefully we'll be able to transition to a broader. So I'm going to read some of the comments, and then I have 2 people here who did not submit, but will be able to talk. So this says, my experience at the Museum of Tolerance was totally different from the first time we went. There truly was a lot to take in. I remembered a lot of the exhibits, but saw new things in the exhibit that I missed the first time. We also got to see the Anne Frank exhibit. That alone had a lot of information I didn't know outside of reading the book and documentaries. We got to experience the new social lab exhibit. There were so many things I loved about that exhibit. My favorite had to be the wall with monumental dates and history. I found some historical information about Filipinos that I did not know. The feelings and emotions I felt from seeing the exhibits to all our discussions as a group to breaking bread is an experience I recommend. I left with a new insight on educating others, on learning new things, and sharing the knowledge. I would go back time and time again because the Museum of Tolerance does not disappoint when it comes to the professional development. Merle Salvador, parent community created. Our trip to the Museum of Tolerance enlightened me on the impact that media plays on our daily life. It has inspired me to prioritize digital literacy and encouraged me to find equitable ways to teach history. Lastly, the trip has informed me on the growth of justice within education and the hurdles still ahead. Mr. Heritage, 6th grade teacher. And having the 2 days to experience the Museum of Tolerance and participate in intensive training as a school group was an extraordinary opportunity for me as a school psychologist and also as a citizen of the world. The time was more than well spent, and I would recommend it to anyone, especially those of us working with young minds and their families. It was humbling, insightful, and also uplifting as we listened to both survivor stories and the stories of those who risked their own lives to give shelter, food, and support. Thank you for the opportunity to participate. I will go again in a heartbeat. Joanne Simonton, School. And then the other piece that I forgot was that we also got to listen to one of the Little Rock Nine and him tell his story through his experience of being a Little Rock Nine student. And we're in the fields now. Mr. Dyson, Ms. Legalski, do you guys have anything you want to add?
I want to do exactly with what I'm saying.
Sorry, Mr. Davis, you may have to come closer
Okay,
to
no.
one of the mics here, if you don't mind.
No problem. So I do want to echo the statements that already made as well. I'm super enjoyed. I went the last time. It was just as well this time. 2 things that really impacted me. Number one was being in the workshops. They told us to make sure we focus on taking it in for ourselves and to not think about our students. Because so often we think about how are we going to integrate in curriculum and getting back to the students. So we have to just not focus on that and just focus on taking it for ourselves. I did that, and I personally took it in as a person first. And then the interaction with the staff, it just really I really got time to spend time with that kid, and I think that was invaluable as well. And then the other thing I wanted to add is hearing the Holocaust survivor. I can't remember her name, but she shared so many things that were impactful and made the experience even more personal. I'm hearing her story, and then after we were done, my idea is I would love to take some students for them to see it. Now that I've sat with it on my own, I'm thinking that's what we'd like to do.
So we have been in discussion about how we can make this happen for some 7th or 8th graders to do a college tour from here down to LA so they can visit universities along the way, attend the Museum of Tolerance, and then kind of make their maybe little goals.
That'd be a great opportunity.
Something like that. So we are in discussion of how we can bring this experience to our kids, because they do offer these experiences for students. It might only be 8th grade, because I know they do high school, so there is an element where there's some really deep conversations
Right.
and experiences that you have. And so we just want to remind you. Ms. Legaspi?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hello.
So personally, for me, the first time we went to the Museum of Tolerance, I think it was overwhelming in both good and bad way. I mean, there was so much to take in, which is why I'm glad I went again, because I think this time I kind of feel like, okay, I'm done being overly emotional from the first visit, and now I can just be a little bit more objective in the information that we're receiving. And I think my favorite part about the trip was not just looking at the different exhibits that they had, but being able to talk about them and what they mean to us individually. And what I mean by that is there was this one exhibit where they showed like a cafe, like an outdoor cafe, and they would kind of like, you would kind of like listen in to individual tables conversation. And the conversations went from, oh, it's probably going to be okay. It's nothing bad's going to happen. People are going to realize, Hitler is like this and like that, and no one's going to let these bad things happen. And the reason why that was my favorite part of the whole museum is because it makes us evaluate what's happening today. And it makes us think, what are we doing today? What are we ignoring today that we might look back on 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now and say, why did we allow that to happen? Why didn't we see the red flags when this was happening? And with everything that's happening out the news right now, it just brings back everything that we learned in the Museum of Tolerance. So I'm really, really glad I went, and I think it's a great learning experience, not just for us as adults, but especially for our children who are going to be dealing with so much more in the future. So thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I think I challenge all of you guys for this. I went for the first time, and yes, you're right. It was so overwhelming and so emotional for the first trip. But I think I need to go for the second time and but I thank all the teachers and the staff that were brought in their testimony and said their testimony. I was looking forward to how many that went?
There were 11 of us.
For all of the staff, how they feel like it, and how would they implement it in their curriculum and the ongoing conversations that they have with the children. So thank you, but I'm looking forward to that, Mr. Dyson.
Next, I just wanted to give an update on summer school. So the dates are going to be June 13th through July 8th. We will not have school on June 20th in celebration of June 19th. And we will not have school on July 4th in celebration of the 4th of July. It'll run from 9 a.m. to 12:30. We are going to be partnering with the Boys and Girls Club for afternoon programming. So for families that need full day care, they would leave us at 12:30, go have lunch, and be able to transition to after school programming with Boys and Girls. I did want to communicate.
Would we be providing lunch through our lunch services?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we will be able, we can do the summer school option, and we can actually provide grab and go lunches for our entire, just like we did last summer. I just want to let everybody know what the history of our, because I think there some people just weren't aware that up until 2021, we have always offered an extended school year for students with IEPs. So students who have an IEP that would fall a year or more behind by not attending school during the summer qualify for what's called ESY or extended school year. So prior to 2021, we have always provided that for our students. The difference now is that beginning last summer, we have now been able to open up a summer program to all of our students. And so that is a plus, that all of our students who aren't necessarily going to fall a year behind, there's still going to be some little bit of lag if you don't take 3 months off. And we're able to offer fun environments as well, enrichment opportunities. And then our students with IEPs will still get their focused ESY support, but with a larger programming role, they are also able to get mainstreamed to do these other experiences as well. So I did want to share with you that we have always offered some sort of summer programming, but with a very limited focus. But due to gotta find a silver lining in things, due to COVID, we are now able to offer summer programming for 100% of our kids. So this is, we're still in the planning stages on what it's gonna look like. I've asked staff if they're interested. We're gonna have some meetings about who really wants, who's gonna commit to working. We're gonna be offering our Elevate Math program again, to incoming third, incoming fourth, definitely incoming sixth, and then possibly incoming fifth if we can get another person. We have three of our staff members will teach incoming third, incoming fourth, incoming sixth, and then they're gonna find somebody to place us for incoming. And then eventually we'll get to a point where hopefully we can offer it, if I can get the teachers to offer it for incoming seventh and incoming teachers. Next, I just wanted to share that we were invited to attend the 10th annual Latinx Youth Conference. So there was a flyer that was shared that's going to be pushed out to our families. And once we get families who are interested, they can provide free transportation for our families because it's down at, I think, Kenyatta College. So this is a nice opportunity for our families that are considered Latinx. Next is board subcommittee reports.
Have that for a minute.
Oh, I didn't put it on there. Thank you very much. So I briefly mentioned earlier, many of us participated in some element of the Habitat for Humanity project that's on Geneva, that is in our attendance area, it's in our community. So the homes are just about finished. They're about ready to hand the homes over to the new residents. And so they reached out to me to ask if they could do what they call their key ceremony. So if they have a ceremony where they actually give the families the keys to their homes. And of course I said yes. And so we thought it was going to be at the beginning of April, but they're not quite done yet. They're not quite ready. So it's going to be towards the end of April. I don't have a date yet, but I wanted to communicate that with you. It'll be on a Saturday. It'll be up here on the yard. The board is all invited because these are our community members who, if they have children, will end up coming here. They are going to provide all of the materials, all of the volunteers. They're just using our space. But I think it's really important. This is one of us talked about this when we built the school. We want to be an anchor institution. And this is a perfect opportunity for us to open our arms and welcome our new community.
Should we extend that to the city?
Yeah, I was thinking they're already invited. Yeah, because it's not, I mean, I can communicate those to them, but it's not my invite to give.
Okay, that's what I was asking, yeah.
Yeah, no, but I will communicate with them when they send us the invite. Because I've asked them for formal invitations for the 5OU to make sure that they give it to the city and to the city. I'm quite certain it's already on the list, but I will definitely remind them. Yes. Okay, next is
Staff, we were part of, building it over there, so.
Got some sweat equity in there. Nice.
So I swapped the order because there's a question that comes up with data analytics and technology that may have an impact on the staff culture and climate. So we're going to start with data analytics and technology. So all of you have a copy of the report. It was added to the agenda, but I will pull it up and let board member Rudolph and board member Gutierrez-Valari speak about data analytics.
Lost my internet connection.
Oh.
We don't have that.
It's kicking out.
Okay, so it's
Okay. Joy, did you want to kick it off or do you want me to?
This is the data analytics.
yeah, we're going to start with data analytics because there's a question that you raised that might have an impact on the action.
No worries.
No, go ahead, Dave.
Okay, so the data analytics and technology subcommittee met and drafted up a purpose so that everyone understands. And we're going to be working on getting this finalized. So it is a work in progress. Let me preface it with that. So we had our first meeting last week. So this is a work in progress, but we wanted to at least define what are we trying to accomplish? And what is the vision for the subcommittee? And it's to use data to inform teaching and learning. We tried to bullet point some of the top priorities of what do we want.
Here's what I found.
What did you find, Alexa? Or Siri?
Siri's trying to help you out.
Siri's trying to help me out. I'll just read through it real quick. So we want all families to be partners in their child's learning. We want all students and families to be able to access assignments and progress virtually and, most importantly, in real time. We want to standardize the process and expectations for all teachers. So we want it to be easy to use. We don't want to add burden. We want this to help, not hinder. Basically, again, how the questions that we're trying to, how students, families access assignments and grades in real time, and then kind of breaking it into two main silos of the actual assignments. So the content that's being delivered to the student and the status of those. And then once the teacher receives that, if it's something that needs to be handed back, the grading or the progress of that. Is it complete or not? And we documented some of the tools that we're currently using, and we're going to be digging into those deeper to see if there's ways that we can additionally leverage those, including Schoolwise, Google Classroom, and Data Zone. I don't want to jump ahead here, but oh yeah, I guess that's kind of at the end here. Okay, and then one of the things is, I think this is what Dr. Pam was alluding to, are the tools that we're currently using meeting our needs? And yes or no, and if not, why? Should we add this question to the survey? And is that what?
Yeah, and so part of that too is, and so this committee was board member Rudolph, board member Gutierrez Flori, myself, and Principal Baker. And then Principal Baker and I looped in Mr. Burtis today, who is our technology lead. I gave him a copy of the notes that we took and said, we want to, as the operational and worker bees, the next step is for us to kind of do interviews with all of our teachers to find out how are they using these tools. If they aren't, what are they using? What gaps are there? So that we can gain more information. So that's one of our next steps. One of the things that he brought up that I want to add to this is one of the tools that we use as well is Remind. And that's a communication tool. And so teachers might be utilizing that to communicate progress. And so we want to sit down with all of our teachers to find out how are you actually utilizing Schoolwise, Google Classroom, Remind? How are you communicating progress? Do your families have access in real time and virtually to assignments that are given? Because we don't want to make any decisions until we have information to know what's working and what's. And so one of the things to board member Rudolph's original statement that this is a work in progress, is that this committee's plan is to work throughout the rest of the semester to narrow down what our vision for teaching and learning is around data analytics and around technology, so that we can draft a concrete rollout and implementation plan for next year. So we can say in August when we come back, this is what we expect, this is how we're going to support you, and this is how we're going to hold you accountable together collectively.
And then just to finish through the rest of the agenda that we put together, what is the vision of technology for the district regarding teaching and learning? And then lastly, of course, once we've done the data collection and the analysis, feedback, how are we going to roll this out? And then, of course, if we do, we want to make sure that we set up all parties involved so that they have a say and they have an opportunity to test it thoroughly before we roll something out. So kind of have a beta users, and then obviously one of the most important things is training, that there's ample training so everyone understands how to fully optimize the tools at their disposal. And Joy, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Not necessarily, but like the mentors for the teachers, we wanted to incorporate the power users and those who need extra help so that there's always someone to fall back on and that you don't feel like you're alone and it's a team effort. So we want to make sure that we set them up for success.
And we want to be clear as the board to determine what is our big picture vision for data analytics. And so that was this idea of we really want to use data to inform teaching and learning. And two, what is our vision for technology beyond one-to-one? We are one-to-one. We have iPads and Chromebooks available to all of our students. But now we want to really talk about what does that actually look like in relationship to teaching and learning? How are teachers using it as a tool to move kids across the continuum on the standards, to get us to at grade level or above? And how are students using it to show evidence of their learning? And so we don't have a clear statement of what that actually looks like. And so one of the things that Mr. Curtis brought up as well, that we'll bring back to the committee, is our technology standards scope and sequence. So we can talk about what that looks like as well as we start moving deeper into these conversations.
Any questions or concerns?
Very well.
Yeah, I think our main concern was that we wanted all the teachers to be on the same level so that they're communicating with the families and the students on their progress and where they are
I
throughout
think
the
that's
year.
important. Yeah.
And it may look different from what it means to communicate progress for a kindergartner or second grader than it does for an eighth grader. And so there has to be some looseness and tightness involved. But we do need to set a minimum expectation of what we want.
Right.
I guess, did the subcommittee for this, did we want to set any goals for our next meeting? I don't know if there's anything in particular we wanted to try and achieve to report out on by the next meeting by April.
But I would say
Yeah.
we need to come together and we need to draft some questions that are standard empathy questions for me, Mr. Burtis, and Ms. Baker to ask.
Perfect. Okay,
And then a timeline of what it's going to look like between now and the end of this week.
that sounds good.
Can we start that off with incorporating that one question into the survey so that we can get an initial feedback on?
That's a point. So when we get to that.
You're gonna present that,
As a mom,
And
isn't it
if,
great that I changed the order?
Yay. So we will move on to the staff culture and climate.
The first BBTA executive.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
And that's board member Aviana and board member Bumpy.
Okay.
Go ahead, Rick.
So on February 17th, BTA reached out to board members, myself and Papua, and by that time we established a subcommittee within the board. So we met with the BTA leadership team alongside with our superintendent, Dr. Pittman, and what they brought to our attention was primarily a presentation talking about the iceberg model, which is by Peter Senge. I don't know if everyone is familiar with that, but if we're looking at the iceberg above the surface, there's things that you can visually see, but as you look, what you can't see below is a very broad spectrum of history and information that you can't see below the surface. So, upon that, the leadership was bringing to our attention some of the key things that we talked about earlier, which was one of them standard-based grading. And during that process, there's events during that time in history that happened as to why there may have been some misalignment as far as staff not being consistent through the grading process. So I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time breathing.
You okay?
Oh,
Yeah, water.
Do you have water?
no, I'm fine.
I think we need water.
Okay, let's take a 5-minute break. We'll adjourn for 5 minutes.
No, I'm sorry. You do it.
No, it's okay. Take your time.
Yeah, we're gonna take a 5-minute break and that way
Yeah.
kids can use the,
Thank you.
Do you want us to back away and you can take your mask off? Would that be helpful?
No, no. I'm good. Give me a second here.
yeah, no worries. We're on a 5-minute break.
Sit down.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Is it?
No. What was it before? It was something else before. I had my first date there and I can't remember the name of it.
Okay, we are back. Thank you for sharing with us this picture, right? Hand it back to your member Audit.
So, yeah, so we met with the leadership team of the BTA, and we were able to communicate with them together. We were there as observers, Teresa and I. And, during that process, there was a lot of information that was communicated and shared with us. And during this process, sorry. Yeah. Teresa, can you?
Yeah, Teresa,
She's chewing.
During the process, we were giving a list of concerns from the staff that that was mentioned. And it was a huge list. So board member Rick and I were out of card, because we don't even know what we were walking into and what was, and I was speechless at the time. And so we were trying to absorb, and what Superintendent Dr. Pittman was there herself too. But we were reminded, as board members, that was not our job to be fixing anything that's the list of concerns. We talked about it, we identify it, and then, so now what do we need to do about it? So, long story short, this is gonna be long. Dr. Pittman is, we met again yesterday just to go over, what we're going to report. And Dr. Pittman, we put all our, what's the word? We all know that Dr. Pittman is the only employee that we have. Everybody else, that's Dr. Pittman's responsibility. We wanted Dr. Pittman yesterday. We walked out with the expectation that Dr. Pittman our expectation will go and fix A and C. Some things will not be fixed right away, but she now can identify it. She will work on it. Then she goes and gives it to the staff, and then she reports back to us. So again, it's going to be a long process. But going back to Rick saying, the tip of the iceberg. And maybe some things we can change, and some things it's going to take years and years to fix. But the most important thing is that we heard what some of the staff members. And the other thing that I took a comment was said that we favor the admin. They feel that the board favor the admin over staff. But then we make it clear that we're not here to make any favoritism, and it might look like that way, but we only work with them. We're not going to be not so much not dealing with the staff, but we heard them. But at the same time, too, the other thing is Dr. Pittman will work with them the process, the protocol of how to bring it to our attention, with making sure that every process is covered. So we hold Dr. Pittman accountable, and she will do her best to report to us everything that was on that list, not everything, but the top priority. Any questions?
So in that vein, one of the things that we discussed, and we're gonna have our Saturday, March 19th, board study session. And so in that vein was a conversation of if it doesn't happen on, we want to bring it up to the consultant on March 19th, is actually sitting down and writing goals for me with accountability measures that I can then go back and say, okay, this is what needs to happen and this is how I'm going to support. And so all of these are tied together in terms of, like I mentioned before, around standards-based or around data analytics and technology, is when we come up with a plan and you guys give goals for me that are related to your board goals as well as our LCAP, then we can come out with an implementation plan. So in August, we could say to staff, these are the, I'm just beginning. These are the 3 things that we expect from you. We expect them from you in at this particular way. We are going to provide you support. And we're going to hold everybody accountable in this particular. And then we can do feedback loops throughout the school year that then is tied to my goals that then comes to you as a board in terms of evaluating. So part of this iceberg model is, as I talked about before, really doing systems thinking and really thinking about what are the patterns and trends and what are the things that we can address that'll have an impact, hopefully a domino effect on other systems that we have in place and other things that we need to address. And then meeting with the consultant to talk with the 5 of you about how do we draft goals for and how do you want to hold me accountable so that all of this can be intertwined, since I am really.
Do you think where some boards, there's a gray area where they may sometimes overstep their bounds, but are there facts where staff don't understand our role as well?
Yes, it's a combination of both. Yes. And so to Teresa's point about process is, and I think that's something great that we can have our conversation with Luann when we meet with her on the 19th, is how do other districts communicate what the role of the board is in a way that staff and families understand so that we can be a cohesive team to make this the best way sure.
That was my question to her. She asked me if I need anything else, and then I said. So,
does anybody have any questions?
Yes, Dr. Ruda, Mr. Ruda.
Dr. Ruda, you got stepped up, huh?
Well, it's just, I'm looking at the attachment and I'm seeing 17 bullet points. So obviously, but I'm wondering, you had mentioned like 3. I'm wondering if this is something that you do or the subcommittee as a whole. The question is going through this list of 17 and then assigning them a rating as far as priority, P1, P2, P3. So who would do that?
Me and our leadership.
Okay.
And so, because then you're getting in the weeds.
No, I'm not saying that we do. If it doesn't.
Well, and this is a conversation that I have with the executive team, because we met again after the 6 of us met. This is, well, they put this together as a visual to see what an iceberg and at the top of conversations. The unintended consequence of that is that you guys think here's this list. That's not what that is.
Okay.
This is not a list that we're going to go in and we're going to go, oh, we're going to address this and we're going to fix this and then we're going to address. That's not how that's meant to be.
Okay.
And so this was a broad conversation about things that have either been said or heard or seen, and what's going on in our district right now. And then what we did is we picked a topic. So we landed on standards-based grading because it didn't have a lot of emotion attached to it.
Yep.
So we wanted to choose a topic that we could tackle from an intellectual standpoint in terms of looking at our systems. So we don't want to go to that and just go down the laundry list and say, that's not the intent. The intent was just for them to show the subcommittee, we had this broader conversation. These were some things. Now we're taking this one item and we're working through the iceberg model And once we get that really good, then we're gonna hand it off to another team. We're gonna hand it off to our instructional leadership team, which is where standards-based grading should be. And we're gonna model for them what it means to do an iceberg deep dive so that we can start addressing systems.
But I guess,
So, yes, so I guess I said it out, communicate it out wrong. The list is there, it's an example of what we need to know. It gives us a perspective to see the iceberg, to kind of see what's underneath that iceberg. So some of those are like history way back before Dr. Pittman came, way before I came on board. So am I gonna be able to fix that? I don't know. I mean, there's some things that we can't fix it. But the process is offering them the process of how to do it. Is what we need to let the staff know. And we even let the staff know that we heard you. We heard you. Then what do we do next?
And so part of it was reminding them that as one, as board subcommittee, they're there to listen. And two, as a board, you're to provide guidance around vision and possibly process. But in terms of organizational or operational changes,
Implementation.
that's up to me
Yeah.
and Ms. Baker and
I guess though, then that's where, so I like the example you gave of picking standards-based grading. So,
Right, and that was Rick's most concern and
Okay.
myself was the,
okay, so what can we expect by, rather than me saying something, because I don't know, it's like, well, what action is going to be taken over the next 4 weeks?
so we as superintendent and principal and executive team have already met again, and we're continuing to go through the iceberg model to move through the whole process, specifically related to standards-based. Then we have another meeting set up for us to communicate with the subcommittee on what's happened between our last meeting and now. And then that would be able to be shared out at the next.
I mean, I guess I'm just wondering if there's, in addition to standards-based, could we pick like the top 3 priorities?
And I'm asking you not to right
Not-
now.
not to do
because
that.
I need us to
Okay.
get one really well. And
Okay.
if we say, well, now we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this, because that was part of the conversation with the executive team, was do we move on to something else? And I said, we haven't even done the meat of this. No, I don't want us to move on to something else, because we
Okay.
need to get really good at this before we move on.
And I understand that. I just think we need to definitely put a sense of urgency
Oh,
behind
there
it.
is a sense of.
Because although this is just a list, I'm still taking at least the content as being still valid concerns.
Oh, yeah, then we're addressing,
And some of these concerns to me jump off the paper.
right, and
And
so
I'm
those
just saying, I just want to make sure that we're putting some hustle behind, and obviously there's only so much we can do. We're
well,
short-staffed.
we did, I asked the question right there, right, to the staff that was there. What do you want me as a board member to do to this?
Yeah,
Without beating around the bush, we asked that question.
I guess what I'm hearing from Mr. Rudolph is that he wants to at least list 3 top priorities amongst the whole list. I know we want to focus on one initially, but as long as we have a top 3 priorities so that we know that these are the main concerns.
Right.
for it.
But what I'm asking is for you to let me and Ms. Baker
Decide
and
on
the
what it is.
executive team to work through this process. If you want to go through and pick 3 things, that's great. You are more than welcome to do that. I'm just asking for you to give us an opportunity to work through the process so that we can do it well.
well, no, and actually, to your point earlier, I don't necessarily think we pick the priorities.
Right.
What I would like delivered to us.
Because they may rate it differently than what you are.
Exactly. And that, and to be honest, I would give their rating more weight than our rating.
Mhm.
And that's where I was thinking of using a similar thing where you give it a P1, P2, P3. Priority 1 is the highest priority. Priority 3 is the lowest. And that way you can say, well, let's work on our P1 projects first.
Right, so we can go back when we have our subcommittee meeting again. We can go back and say, in terms of the process, The board doesn't just want you to focus on one, they want you to focus on three, so choose your three. That can be part of the conversation, yes. And
They
that
were
can be the
just saying
direction from
something
the board.
different though. What I'm hearing from what you said is 3 categories and putting buckets into.
Well,
Is that
there's that, I mean, there's the 3 categories, but it's an exercise to make sure you're taking the most important urgent ones. And again, what I am interpreting here as a P1 may not be what the staff, Dr. Pittman see as a P1, which is why I say, well,
They might not
it would be
want
good
us to
for
put
them
focus on
so
that.
I don't even.
First them
think
to
that's helpful.
categorize what is the priority 1s, priority 2s, priority 3s. And then obviously, if out of these 17, let's say 5 of them, well, that's too much to work on. To your point. You can't do all 5 at once, but then what would be a reasonable amount to work on?
Right,
Is it
so-
just 1? Maybe it is, but
So our plan was for us to work on one and go through the entire process so that we all have a clear understanding, so we could then train other staff members to do the same process with other topics. Because some of those topics don't fall under instructional leadership. Some of those topics fall under our transformative social emotional.
Mhm.
Some of those topics fall under our anti-racist, our STAR team. And some of those topics fall under our instructional leadership team. And so our goal was for us as the executive team and Ms. Baker and myself to get really good at this process, specifically with standard-based grading, so we could then hand it off to our instructional leadership team, and they can dive into working through the system to make improvements, and then model this process for the topics that fit into social emotion and the topics that fit into our STAR and anti-racist, so that it's not the same 6 people doing the work.
Right.
And we're not relying on the same 6 people for capacity, that we're building capacity across our district so that multiple people know what systems thinking is and what system work looks like, and they can do this work in smaller groups.
yeah, that makes, so I guess then I understand. So what do you think, and it's the best guess, is a reasonable amount of time to work through that first one?
Well, we are
Is it
scheduled,
grading?
we're this spring, yeah.
Spring?
Yeah.
Like May?
It's,
Yeah, I would say we would get to, yeah.
Okay.
I
I'm
mean,
just trying to put
Well,
it.
if we don't, I'll come back and tell you that.
Right,
So to
exactly.
our
I just would like to at
conversation
least
the other
have
day,
a starting point.
If we have to take a pivot because
Yeah.
of, I will come back and communicate to you, we're taking a pivot because of X, Y, and Z.
Okay, but I just wanted to, so let's try and, a goal would be that in the May board meeting, we'd be able to have some sort of presentation of how this whole exercise went on this first one.
Yeah.
And that also leads me to a second kind of thing is, and I had mentioned this to you about some sort of like tracker, especially if you're gonna have different things going assigned to different groups. It'd probably be good to have some sort of, I mean, at least not the lead level, but as far as reporting to the board, the status of these things. And then once they're closed, you mark it as closed.
So
And
I think that's a great conversation to have with Luann
yeah,
on what other districts do in terms of when they roll out initiatives, how do they monitor progress?
yeah,
And how do they keep track of what's going on for the community?
sounds good.
So then the last group is now staff culture and finance.
So in the February board meeting, we discussed getting together and creating this staff culture and climate survey. It consists of 15 questions which have ratings with either strongly disagree or strongly agree, and then options for feedback and comments. We can go through the questions. The first one is, I enjoy working at Bayshore.
So I'm hoping that everybody read them in advance since they had the packet. And then we don't have to go
Right.
line by line. They would just give feedback on whether if they want to make changes.
So it goes over how they feel about working here, whether they feel excited about the future, and different aspects that we would like to get the pulse of how they feel while being here at Bayshore. If you guys have had time to review it, are there any questions or things that you think we should change?
yeah, there were only just a few minor revisions that we had. And we added one item to the original. I think if you scroll up a little bit more,
This way?
yeah. I feel comfortable going to administration with the concern. So that was the only one that was
And
added
then
to
the
that
follow-up
survey.
question to it.
Well, again, going back to the data analytics, if we want, does anyone disagree if we add the question? Are the
About the technology?
technology tools meeting the needs of our staff? Does anyone mind? I wouldn't mind having it, again, I don't want to send out 15 different surveys,
Right.
so
Mhm.
I think adding that would kind of help collect that
But
information as well.
I think it's key if we add that information there.
Okay. Anyone object to adding that question?
No. So what is the question you want?
Well, I guess we've phrased it in a statement. It would be something like,
I am providing the appropriate tools.
the appropriate technology and tools to,
That's too broad.
Yeah.
is it? Okay.
They can add comments and feedback.
Okay.
To support teaching and learning.
Yeah. Well, I guess to me, I wanted to make sure it's almost kind of geared towards some of our, what we want statements on the agenda for the data analytics portion of
Regarding the current
you know,
technology.
to facilitate seamless real-time communication with students and family. Again, feel free to wordsmith it if anybody else has any.
No, you covered it.
I
'cause
think
was
that's,
gonna say.
That work?
Yep.
And then I had. I think it was 2 questions, but I'm only remembering one right now, which is,
So this is for all classified and
It's
certified.
for all of our.
anonymous.
Even custodian.
Even the custodian.
is it safe to communicate to folks that this will be considered anonymous?
Yeah, it would be anonymous.
Okay,
It would be anonymous, but they have to sign in, which I don't see.
okay,
But so we ensure that they are answering it as a Bayshore staff member. So they have to have a Bayshore
that makes sense,
Yeah.
yeah, but
email to take the
All in
survey.
English?
I can possibly translate it for one of our staff that want it. Yes.
Yeah.
But yes, it would go to all of our staff and it would be. And then all of the rating questions are required and the comments and feedback are.
sounds good.
And so it would go, if you guys approve it, it would go out tomorrow. And then I would set a due date of saying, probably a week and a half. And then the staff culture and climate subcommittee would meet to go over the data and come back with a presentation for our April board with the results.
So we just need to make a motion to approve this survey.
When is this gonna go out?
Oh,
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow?
Do you have one?
it was more of a comment, and that is, I'd love to have it communicated that the goal would be 100% response rate.
Sure.
So, and I don't know if you have the ability to get a percentage of how many people
Oh, I
respond.
can tell how many respond.
Okay.
It doesn't tell me who, but like.
No, that's fine. I don't want to hoop it.
Yeah, the mass, I knew that 19 people respond.
So if you
The
could,
goal is go up tomorrow, but we need it in a second language. So I don't think.
what
that's gonna
second
be done.
language?
tonight.
Could we ask if they need it in a different language?
Or they can request if they need.
As
Have you
opposed to-
ever sent out surveys in other
I don't
languages?
feel like we should ask, we should bring it.
So if you want to translate, I can translate every single question to Spanish and Chinese, which are the other languages that staff members
Right.
feel more comfortable reading. It's not gonna happen tonight.
Right,
So
that's what I'm
it's gonna go out
saying.
tomorrow, but it can happen by phone.
Okay.
So is that? okay
And
with
so
you guys?
every question would be in English, and then right under it Spanish, and right under it Chinese.
Would it, I mean, again, would it be possible to ask people to have the results in by Friday, the 18th? That would give people one business week, and then if we needed to, obviously not take up time with Luann, but if we wanted to discuss it, we could add it to the agenda to talk about it as part of the study session.
We could, but I'd like our board subcommittee
Mhm.
to look at it before it comes back to the
Okay,
entire board. So that we can put together a presentation as a subcommittee, because that's the purpose of the sub.
Yeah.
So yes, I would say we could ask for it to be done by the 18th. And then the three of us can meet that next week. Then we go on spring break, and then we would present it on the 12th.
Motion.
Second.
Second,
On. It's 10 o'clock.
All in favor?
So the last thing that I wanted to share was that I've been, to sit on the AXA Legislative Policy Committee. So on Monday, I'm gonna spend the whole